When billionaire CEO Vivian Lockhart whispered, "This is my end," beneath tons of collapsed concrete, she didn't know the man digging toward her through the unstable tunnel was someone she'd already destroyed. Caleb Rowan, the single father whose safety warnings she'd ignored, whose partner died because of her cost-cutting decisions, heard her faint knocking in the darkness. He could walk away. He should walk away. But he kissed his daughter goodbye and crawled back into the mountain that wanted them both dead. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey reaches. The Ridgecrest Tunnel gleamed like a promise beneath the Colorado mountains, its freshly poured concrete walls still smelling of chemicals and ambition. At 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late October, the tunnel stretched nearly 2 miles through granite and limestone, a testament to modern engineering, or at least that's what the press releases claimed. Vivian Lockhart didn't believe the press releases anymore. She sat in the back of her limousine, the leather seats cool against her tailored Armani suit, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through safety reports on her tablet. The blue light illuminated her face in the darkness, 42 years old, elegant features drawn tight with an anxiety she couldn't name. Her driver, Marcus, had served her family for 15 years and knew better than to make conversation when she wore that particular expression. "Ms. Lockhart," Marcus said softly, his eyes meeting hers in the rear-view mirror. "We're entering the tunnel now. ETA to Denver, 45 minutes. Vivian nodded without looking up. The documents on her screen told a story she'd spent 6 months trying to ignore. Structural concerns flagged by 3 different engineering consultants, all dated, all stamped urgent, all filed away in digital folders she'd marked for future review. Microfractures detected in support column B47. Recommended load capacity, 800 tons. Current projected load, 1,000 to 200 tons. Further investigation required before public opening. She'd opened the tunnel anyway. The governor had been at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The stock price had jumped 12%. The limousine's headlights swept into the tunnel mouth, and suddenly they were swallowed by artificial light, LED strips running along the ceiling in neat, economical rows. Another cost-saving measure. The original design had called for comprehensive lighting every 30 feet. She'd approved spacing them to every 60. Behind her limousine, maintaining a careful distance, a battered 2007 Ford Explorer fought to keep pace with traffic. The SUV had 180,000 miles on it, a cracked windshield held together with clear tape, and a check engine light that had been glowing amber for 6 months. The payments were 3 weeks overdue, but Caleb Rowan had bigger problems than losing his vehicle. "Daddy?" The small voice came from the back seat, sleepy and sweet. "Are we almost home?" Caleb glanced in the mirror at his 7-year-old daughter, Ellie, curled against her booster seat with a stuffed bear clutched to her chest. Her dark hair, so much like her mother's, fell across her face in tangles. They'd spent the day at Children's Hospital in Boulder for Ellie's quarterly checkup, monitoring the heart condition that had already cost them everything they had. 20 minutes, sweetheart," Caleb said, forcing warmth into his voice, despite the exhaustion weighing on every word. "Close your eyes. I'll wake you when we're home." But Ellie was already asleep again, her breathing soft and even, the bear rising and falling with each breath. Caleb's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the tunnel walls closed around them. He knew this tunnel. He'd worked on it, briefly, 18 months ago, before Lockhart Industries had fired him for filing too many safety reports. Before his partner, Tommy Chen, had died in the preliminary shaft collapse that Lockhart's lawyers had successfully argued was an unforeseeable geological anomaly. Tommy had been knocking on the cave-in from the other side for 6 hours before the rescue effort was called off. Caleb had heard every knock, counted every strike of Tommy's hammer against stone, felt every moment of hope drain away as the knocking grew weaker, then stopped. The settlement check had covered 3 months of Ellie's medical bills. The tunnel lights flickered, just once, barely noticeable, but Caleb's body went rigid with the instinct of a man who'd spent 15 years underground. He eased off the accelerator, putting more distance between his Explorer and the limousine ahead. "Marcus?" Vivian's voice cut through the car's silence. "Did you see that?" "See what, Ms. Lockhart?" "The lights, The mountain moved. Not slowly. Not with warning. The explosion of sound came first, a percussive crack that seemed to originate from the bones of the earth itself, so loud it bypassed hearing and went straight to primal terror. The tunnel's LED strips shattered in sequence, darkness racing down the passage like a living thing. Then the ceiling came down. Concrete and steel and the weight of 1 billion tons of mountain descended in a roar that drowned out screaming, drowned out thought, drowned out everything except the absolute certainty of ending. Vivian felt the limousine lurch violently to the left. Marcus shouted something, a prayer maybe, or a goodbye, and then a support beam the size of a telephone pole smashed through the windshield. The car crumpled like aluminum foil, the rear section compacting as metal screamed and glass exploded, and everything that had been order became chaos. Something massive landed on the roof. Vivian felt rather than heard her own scream as the ceiling crushed downward, stopping inches from her face. Her seatbelt locked. The tablet flew from her hands, and then pain, white-hot, absolute pain, erupted in her left leg as a steel beam punched through the car's frame and pinned her against the seat. She tried to breathe but couldn't. Dust, concrete dust, thick as fog, filled the air, filled her mouth, her lungs. She coughed, tasted blood, coughed again. "Marcus?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "Marcus, answer me!" Silence. No, not silence. Groaning. The sound of the mountain settling, of pressure finding new equilibrium, of gravity doing its patient work. Vivian tried to move her leg and nearly blacked out from the pain. The beam had her completely pinned, the metal cold against her skin where her pants had torn. She could feel blood, warm, sticky, pooling beneath her. In the absolute darkness, she couldn't tell how much. "This is shock," she thought distantly. "I'm going into shock. That's bad. I should... But she couldn't remember what she should do. The safety reports had never covered being buried alive. Behind what had been Vivian's limousine, now just a crushed mass of metal barely recognizable as a vehicle, Caleb had 3 seconds of warning. 3 seconds where his brain processed the impossible. The ceiling fracturing in massive geometric patterns. Support columns bowing inward. The entire tunnel structure failing in catastrophic sequence. 3 seconds where every instinct screamed at him to break, but 15 years underground taught him something else. "Hold on!" he shouted, slamming the accelerator to the floor. The Explorer's elderly engine roared. Ellie jerked awake with a cry. The tunnel was collapsing behind them in a wave of destruction, a racing wall of debris and death that moved faster than thought. Caleb aimed for a gap, maybe wide enough, maybe not, between fallen concrete slabs. The Explorer's right side scraped against steel with a shriek of tearing metal. Ellie screamed. Something huge hit the roof, crumpling it downward, but not through. And then, they were out. The Explorer burst from the tunnel's western entrance onto an open road, the collapse roaring behind them like the breath of God. Caleb stood on the brakes, the vehicle skidding sideways, tires smoking. Through the rear window, he watched the mountain swallow the tunnel entrance, watched tons of rock and concrete seal the opening like a closing mouth. Then silence. Just the Explorer's engine ticking as it cooled and Ellie's sobbing from the back seat. "Daddy, Daddy, what happened?" Caleb's hands wouldn't release the steering wheel. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Slowly, so slowly, he turned to look at his daughter. "We're okay, baby. We're okay." But the loud noise, the car, "Daddy, you're shaking." He was. His whole body trembled with adrenaline dump, with the impossible reality of still being alive. Then he heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable to a man who'd spent 6 hours listening to his partner die. Knock, 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 metal on metal, coming from inside the collapsed tunnel. Someone was alive in there. Caleb closed his eyes. "No," his body said. "No, you just survived. You have a daughter. You have someone to live for now. Walk away." But Tommy's face appeared behind his eyelids. Tommy grinning on their first day underground together. Tommy teaching him to read the mountain's moods. Tommy knocking weakly on stone as hope died. Knock, knock, knock. Caleb opened his door. "Daddy?" Ellie's voice rose with panic. "Where are you going?" He pulled her from the back seat, hugged her so tight she squeaked in protest. kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her hair. I need you to be very brave, sweetheart. Can you be brave for me? I don't want to be brave. I want you to stay. Emergency vehicles were already screaming toward them. Someone had seen the collapse, or seismographs had recorded it, or maybe God himself had dialed 911. Fire trucks, ambulances, police cars converged on the scene in a chaos of lights and sirens. Caleb ran toward the first responders, Ellie in his arms, his voice hoarse from dust and fear. Someone's alive in there. I heard knocking. The first firefighter to reach him was young, maybe 25, his face still showing shock at the scale of the disaster. Sir, you need to step back. I heard knocking. Caleb grabbed the man's coat. Metal on metal from inside. Someone's alive. A woman in a white paramedic uniform knelt beside them. Sir, is your daughter injured? Let me check her. She's fine. I need... Caleb's voice cracked. I need someone to listen. There's a person alive in there. The fire chief arrived, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with a face that had seen too many disasters. His nameplate read Morrison. You heard knocking? Morrison's voice was steady, professional. How far in? Maybe 100 yards, rhythmic, deliberate. Someone trying to signal. Morrison turned to his crew. Get seismic sensors on that entrance. I want structural engineers here in 5 minutes. And someone get me a goddamn satellite image of what's still standing in there. But even as he gave orders, Caleb saw the truth in the man's eyes. The tunnel mouth was completely sealed, thousands of tons of debris piled 20 feet high. Even if someone was alive, getting to them would take days, maybe weeks, if the remaining structure held that long. A young paramedic with kind eyes and tired hands approached Caleb. Her badge read Sandra Nguyen. Sir, I'm going to need you to let us take care of your daughter while you give your statement. She's in shock. I'm not in shock, Ellie said fiercely, though tears streaked her dusty face. My daddy saved us. He absolutely did, Sandra said softly. He's a hero. Now can you be a hero too, and let me make sure you're not hurt anywhere? Caleb met his daughter's eyes. Ellie, I need you to go with this nice lady. I need to... You're going back in there. It wasn't a question. Ellie's voice was small but certain. You're going to save whoever's knocking. Caleb's throat closed. How does she know me so well at 7 years old? You always save people, Daddy. That's who you are. Sandra guided Ellie toward an ambulance, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Caleb watched them go, his heart torn between staying with the only family he had left and the sound of knocking that echoed in his memory. Knock, knock, knock. Tommy's knocks had sounded just like that. Morrison appeared at his elbow. Mr. Rowan, Caleb Rowan. I worked on this tunnel 18 months ago, before Lockhart Industries fired me for flagging safety concerns. Morrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You're that Rowan, the whistleblower. They didn't call me that at the wrongful termination hearing. No, I suppose they wouldn't. Morrison studied the collapsed entrance. Your partner died in the preliminary shaft collapse. Tommy Chen, yes. I'm sorry. Caleb said nothing. Sorry didn't bring Tommy back. Sorry didn't change the fact that Vivian Lockhart had signed off on cutting corners, on ignoring warnings, on valuing stock prices over human lives. A structural engineer ran up, tablet in hand, face pale. Chief, satellite imagery shows the central section is completely collapsed. The eastern entrance is sealed too. We're talking about a 2-mile span with approximately, he checked his numbers, 40 to 50,000 tons of debris. Survivors? Morrison asked. Impossible to say, but I'm reading instability throughout the remaining structure. Any attempt to dig from either entrance could trigger a secondary collapse. So we wait. Hope it stabilizes? The engineer met Morrison's eyes. If anyone's alive in there, they have maybe 12 hours of breathable air, less if they're injured and hyperventilating. We wait, they die. Morrison turned back to Caleb. You said you worked on this tunnel. You know the interior layout? Every inch. Where would the knocking be coming from? Caleb closed his eyes, picturing the tunnel's design. If someone was knocked unconscious in the initial collapse and came to after, maybe stuck near the old service alcove at the tunnel's midpoint, there's the emergency ventilation shaft there, only about 20 inches wide, runs up to the surface. If they're conscious enough to signal, they might be near it. Can we dig down through the ventilation shaft? Not without heavy equipment, and the positioning... Caleb opened his eyes. The positioning would take days to set up safely. The mountain's unstable now. Any heavy machinery could trigger another collapse. Morrison's jaw worked. So what are you saying? I'm saying someone needs to go in from the western entrance, on foot, through the gaps in the debris field, small profile, minimal disturbance. That's suicide. The whole thing could come down. Yes. They stood in silence, the truth hanging between them like smoke. Finally, Morrison spoke. I can't order any of my people to go in there. I won't. I'm not asking you to. Rowan, I know that tunnel. I know where the weak points are, where the support structure is strongest. I know what sounds the mountain makes before it shifts. Caleb's voice was steady, certain. And I heard someone knocking. I'm not walking away from that again. You have a daughter, which is exactly why she needs to see that when someone's in trouble, you don't calculate the odds. You help. Morrison studied him for a long moment, then quietly, You know who's in there, don't you? In that limousine. Caleb's jaw tightened. I have an idea. And you're still going in. Especially because I know. Morrison shook his head slowly. You're either the best man I've ever met or the craziest. I haven't decided which. Can I borrow some equipment? I never had this conversation. Morrison gestured to one of his crew. Thompson, get this man a hard hat, a flashlight, a pry bar, and anything else he needs. And make it quick before I regain my sanity. 20 minutes later, Caleb stood at the western tunnel entrance, his borrowed equipment strapped to his belt. The entrance wasn't completely sealed. Gaps existed between massive concrete slabs, spaces where a man might crawl, if he was willing to bet his life that the mountain wouldn't shift. Sandra found him before he could enter. Ellie's stable, mild shock, some bruising, but she'll be fine. She wants to see you. Tell her, Caleb's voice caught. Tell her I love her and that I'll be back. Don't lie to that little girl. I'm not. He met Sandra's eyes. One way or another, I'm coming back out. He turned toward the tunnel entrance, then stopped. If I don't make it, her aunt's contact information is in your wallet. We already have it. Caleb nodded. Then, before he could think about it anymore, before fear could freeze him in place, he dropped to his hands and knees and crawled into the darkness. The first gap was tight, maybe 2 feet high, stretching into blackness. Caleb's flashlight beam cut through dust so thick it looked like fog. The air tasted like concrete and blood. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped with a rhythm that sounded almost like knocking. Don't think about it, he told himself. Just move. 1 foot forward, then another, like Tommy taught you. The mountain groaned. It was a sound Caleb knew intimately, the voice of millions of tons of rock finding new balance, settling into a fresh configuration, not collapsing, not yet. But warning that collapse was possible, was close, was waiting for the wrong vibration to trigger it. He inched forward, his shoulders scraping against concrete, his knees finding glass and metal and things he didn't want to identify. The flashlight beam picked out rebar twisted like taffy, support columns sheared at angles that proved just how violent the collapse had been. And everywhere, the signs that corners had been cut. Substandard concrete that crumbled at a touch. Welds that had separated cleanly, proof they'd never been done properly in the first place. Support columns that were hollow inside, filled with foam instead of the required steel reinforcement. Every shortcut, every cost-saving measure, every decision that valued profit over safety. They were all here, written in debris and death. 20 feet in, Caleb's radio crackled. Morrison's voice cut through static. Rowan, seismic sensors are showing instability in your sector. You need to turn back. Caleb didn't respond. He'd left the radio on so they could track him, not so they could talk him out of saving a life. The gap narrowed further, forcing him onto his belly. His chest pressed against jagged concrete. Above him, a massive slab hung, supported by nothing but friction and prayer. If it shifted, when it shifted, He would be paced. Keep moving. His flashlight picked out something ahead, the crushed remains of Vivian's limousine. The rear section was compressed to maybe 18 inches tall. The front section, where Marcus had been sitting, simply didn't exist anymore. Just a mass of metal and stone that had once been a human being. Caleb forced himself to breathe slowly, to push down the horror. He'd seen death before. Underground, death was always close, but it never got easier. Hello? His voice sounded strange in the enclosed space, flat, dead, swallowed by dust. Can anyone hear me? Knock, knock, knock. There. Faint but definite. Metal on metal. I hear you, Caleb shouted. Keep knocking. I'm coming. He squeezed toward the sound, his flashlight beam finally penetrating the limousine's interior through a gap where the door had been partially torn away. And there she was. Vivian Lockhart, billionaire CEO, was pinned in the back seat of her crushed vehicle. A support beam had punched through the car's frame and trapped her left leg. Blood, dark and thick, pooled beneath her. Her face was ghostly white in the flashlight beam, her expensive suit torn and filthy, her perfectly styled hair matted with dust and blood. But her eyes were open, conscious, aware. And when she saw Caleb's face, those eyes widened with recognition. You, she whispered. Me, Caleb agreed. They stared at each other across the wreckage. The woman who'd cut corners and the man who'd lost his partner because of it. The woman who'd valued money over safety and the man who'd tried to stop her. The woman who was dying and the man who could save her. Vivian's lips trembled. A tear cut through the dust on her cheek. This is my end, she said softly. This is my end, and I deserve it. Caleb should have agreed. Every fiber of his being wanted to agree. To turn around, to crawl back out, to let justice take its natural course. But he heard Tommy's voice in his memory. We don't let people die, Caleb. Not even the ones who deserve it. Because once you make that calculation, once you decide who's worth saving and who's not, you're not a rescuer anymore. You're just another executioner. Caleb pulled the pry bar from his belt. Yeah, well, he said, wedging the tool under the beam pinning Vivian's leg. Today's not your day to die. Vivian stared at him in disbelief. Why? After what I did to you, to your partner, why would you... Because, Caleb grunted, applying pressure to the pry bar. My daughter's watching from outside, and I need her to know that we save people, even the ones we hate, especially the ones we hate. The beam shifted slightly. Vivian screamed, a raw sound of agony that echoed through the dead space. I know it hurts, Caleb said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his arms. But I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that for me? Yes, Her breath came in gasps. You're Caleb Rowan, the whistleblower. That's what they call me now. Tommy Chen was your partner. Yes. I killed him. The words came out flat, certain. I ignored the safety reports. I pushed to open early. I killed him. I know. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Then why are you saving me? Caleb met her gaze, and in that moment, all the anger, all the rage, all the grief he'd carried for 18 months crystallized into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but something more powerful than hate. Because Tommy would want me to, he said simply. The mountain groaned again, louder this time. Dust rained from above. The slab hanging over them shifted, just an inch, but an inch was all it took to go from precarious balance to catastrophe. The tunnel's going to collapse again, Vivian said. She'd stopped crying, her voice suddenly clear, almost calm. You need to go, now, leave me. Not happening. I have a daughter too, a brother. They'll survive without me. But your Ellie needs to know her father doesn't abandon people. Caleb repositioned the pry bar. Now stop talking and save your strength. This is going to hurt like hell. He pulled with everything he had. Muscles strained. The beam shifted another inch. Vivian screamed again, her hands clawing at the seat, her whole body rigid with agony. Almost got it, Caleb gasped, and then the mountain spoke. Not a groan this time. A crack. Sharp, definitive, final. The slab above them shifted. More dust fell, then small rocks, then chunks of concrete. The whole structure was failing, the delicate balance finally giving way. "Go!" Vivian shouted. "For God's sake, just go!" But Caleb was already moving. He dropped the pry bar, grabbed Vivian's shoulders, and pulled with every ounce of strength he possessed. Her trapped leg was still pinned, and she screamed as bone ground against metal, but Caleb didn't stop. "Your leg, you're going to—" "I don't care about my leg," Caleb snarled. "I care about getting you out alive." One final desperate pull. Vivian's leg came free, or part of it did. Caleb couldn't tell in the darkness and didn't want to know. And suddenly they were both falling backward as the limousine's frame collapsed entirely. Caleb landed hard on his back, Vivian on top of him. Above them, the slab dropped into the space they'd just occupied, sealing off the limousine completely. For a moment, they both just lay there, gasping, covered in dust and blood. Then Vivian whispered, "You crazy son of a bitch! You actually did it!" "We're not out yet," Caleb said, pushing himself to his knees. His flashlight had rolled away, its beam cutting crazy angles through the dust. "Can you move?" Vivian tried to shift her weight and nearly blacked out from the pain. "My leg! I can't feel it below the knee." "Don't look at it." Caleb retrieved his flashlight and deliberately avoided shining it on Vivian's injury. He didn't need to see it to know it was bad. Compound fracture at minimum, possibly crush injury, definitely requiring immediate medical attention they didn't have. "I'm going to carry you," he said. "You can't. You'll never make it through those gaps with me." "Watch me." Caleb got his arms under Vivian's shoulders and knees, lifting her as gently as he could. She was heavier than he expected, not overweight, just solid, athletic, and the narrow crawl space ahead looked impossible. But Tommy had taught him that impossible was just another word for hasn't been done yet. "Hold on to me," Caleb said. "Don't let go, no matter what." Vivian wrapped her arms around his neck. Her breath was hot against his ear, rapid and shallow. Shock was setting in hard now, her body temperature dropping, her mind starting to drift. "Stay with me," Caleb ordered. "Talk to me. Tell me something. Anything." "Like what?" "I don't know. Your favorite color, your daughter's name, why you became a CEO." "My daughter—" Vivian's voice caught. "Lydia. She's 8. Lives with her father in Manhattan. I barely see her. I chose work over everything." "What else?" "My brother, Marcus. Not the driver Marcus. Different Marcus. He wanted to be a teacher. I made him join the company. Made him give up his dreams because Lockharts don't teach. They build empires." Caleb squeezed through a gap that scraped skin from his shoulders. Vivian clutched against his chest. "Keep going," he said. "I didn't want to be CEO," Vivian continued, her words coming faster now, tumbling out like a confession. "I wanted to be a photographer, travel the world, but my father said, he always said, Lockharts don't take pictures, they make history." The mountain groaned again, closer, angrier. "Move faster," Vivian whispered, "working on it." They reached a section where the collapse had created a small chamber, maybe 6 feet across, barely tall enough to crouch in. Caleb set Vivian down as gently as he could, his arms screaming with fatigue. "Rest," she said. "Just for a minute. You're exhausted." "Can't." Caleb checked his watch, nearly 1 a.m. They'd been underground for almost an hour. "Your leg needs treatment. Every minute counts." He scanned the chamber with his flashlight, looking for the best route forward. The western entrance was maybe 50 yards ahead now, but those 50 yards looked like a nightmare, a maze of unstable debris with no clear path. "Rowan?" Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. "Rowan, respond. Seismic activity is spiking. You need to abort." Caleb grabbed the radio. "Found the survivor. Vivian Lockhart. Compound leg fracture, possibly worse. We're 50 yards from the western entrance." 50 yards might as well be 50 miles in that instability. "Come back." Static drowned out the rest as another tremor shook the tunnel. Small rocks rained down. Somewhere in the darkness, something large collapsed with a grinding roar. Vivian grabbed Caleb's arm. "He's right. Leave me here. Go while you still can." "Not happening. You have a daughter." And you have a daughter and a brother and probably dozens of people who need you to survive this. Caleb lifted her again, his muscles protesting. So stop trying to be noble. It doesn't suit you. You hate me. Yeah, I do. Then why? Because hate doesn't get to win, Caleb said simply. Not tonight. They pushed forward into the maze of debris. Caleb had to set Vivienne down 3 times to squeeze through gaps too narrow for both of them, then pull her through after him. Each time she bit back screams as her shattered legs scraped against stone. And each time Caleb thought about turning back, about leaving her, about saving himself for Ellie's sake. But Tommy's voice kept echoing in his mind. We save people, Caleb. That's who we are. 20 yards from the entrance, they hit an impassable wall, a solid mass of concrete and steel with no gaps, no way forward. No, Caleb breathed. No, there has to be a way. He ran his hands over the debris, searching for any weakness, any opening. His flashlight picked out rebar, shattered concrete, crushed metal. No gaps. Behind them, another section of the tunnel collapsed. The sound was like God slamming a door. We're trapped, Vivienne said quietly. No, there's always a way. Tommy taught me there's always... His flashlight beam caught something. A ventilation duct, partially crushed but not completely collapsed, maybe 18 inches wide. There, Caleb said. That's too small. Even you couldn't. It'll widen. Trust me. Caleb pulled out his pry bar and began hammering at the duct's edges. The metal was thin, designed for airflow, not structural support. It bent under his strikes. You'll bring the whole thing down, Vivienne shouted. Better than dying here. He hammered harder, expanding the opening inch by inch. 20 inches. 24. Not enough. The mountain groaned. The floor tilted slightly. Caleb, shut up and let me work. 30 inches. Caleb dropped the pry bar and pushed Vivienne toward the opening. You first, he said. I'll never fit with my leg. You will. On your back, pull yourself through with your arms. I'll push. Vivienne stared at the narrow duct, then at Caleb. If I get stuck, you won't. But if I do, then I'll pull you out and we'll try something else. Now go! Vivienne positioned herself at the duct's entrance, her broken legs stretched out behind her. Caleb could see now just how badly injured she was. The leg bent at an unnatural angle, bone visible through torn fabric and skin. She'd be lucky to keep it, but first they had to survive. Push, Vivienne said through gritted teeth. Caleb pushed. Vivienne screamed as her leg dragged across metal, but she kept pulling herself forward with her arms, inch by agonizing inch. The duct groaned under her weight, but held. Then she was through, gasping on the other side. Your turn, she shouted back. Caleb dove into the duct head first. The space was tighter than he expected, metal pressing against his shoulders from all sides. For a terrible moment, he thought he might actually be stuck, might die wedged in this metal coffin while Vivienne bled out on the other side. Then his hands found purchase on the far edge, and he pulled. He emerged into blessed open space, not free, not yet, but close. Ahead, barely visible through dust and darkness, he could see lights, flashlights, the rescue team. Help! Caleb screamed. We're here! We need help! Voices shouted back, lights converged, hands reached through debris to pull first Vivienne, then Caleb, toward the entrance. And then, impossibly, miraculously, they were out. Fresh air hit Caleb's face like a slap. He fell to his knees on actual ground, actual grass, under actual stars. Behind him, the tunnel entrance groaned one final time, then collapsed completely, sealing itself like a tomb. But they were out. Both of them. Alive. Paramedics swarmed Vivienne, loading her onto a stretcher, starting IVs, stabilizing her leg. Morrison appeared at Caleb's side, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. You crazy, magnificent bastard, Morrison said quietly. You actually did it. Caleb couldn't respond, couldn't process, could only watch as they loaded Vivienne into an ambulance, her face pale in the flashing lights, but her eyes found his across the chaos and held. Thank you, she mouthed. Caleb nodded once, then a small voice cut through everything. Daddy! Ellie ran toward him, Sandra chasing after her, and Caleb caught his daughter in his arms and held on like she was the only real thing in the world. She was crying. He was crying. They were both shaking and alive and together. "You came back!" Ellie sobbed into his shoulder. "You came back like you promised." "Always," Caleb whispered. "Always, baby. Always." Over his daughter's head, Caleb watched the ambulance carrying Vivian Lockhart disappear into the night, lights flashing red against the mountain's dark face. He'd saved her. The woman who'd killed his partner. The woman who'd cut corners and valued profit over life. He'd saved her. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like the right thing to do. Tommy would have approved. The ambulance carrying Vivian disappeared around the mountain's curve, its siren fading into the pre-dawn darkness. Caleb stood there holding Ellie, feeling the tremors in his own body finally begin to subside as Sandra Nguyen approached with a medical kit and a look that said she wasn't taking no for an answer. "Mr. Rowan, I need to check you out," she said firmly. "You've been underground for 90 minutes in an unstable collapse zone. Protocol requires—" "I'm fine," Caleb said, though his hands were still shaking and his shoulders screamed where the tunnel walls had scraped away skin. "You're bleeding through your shirt in 3 places and you can barely stand. Sit." Ellie pulled back from her father's embrace, her small hands framing his dusty face. "Daddy, you're hurt. Please let her help you." The fear in his daughter's eyes, that was what broke him. Caleb nodded and let Sandra guide him to the back of an ambulance. Ellie climbed up beside him, refusing to let go of his hand as Sandra began cleaning the wounds on his shoulders. "These are deep," Sandra muttered, applying antiseptic that burned like fire. "You'll need stitches. And your hands. Jesus, what did you do to your hands?" Caleb looked down at his palms, seeing them clearly for the first time. The skin was torn and bloody, embedded with concrete dust and metal fragments. He'd been gripping the pry bar so hard for so long that he'd essentially shredded his own flesh without noticing. "I had to get her out," he said simply. Sandra worked in silence for a moment, then spoke quietly so only Caleb could hear. "You know who she is, right? Vivian Lockhart. The woman whose company—" "I know. And you still went back for her." "Yeah." Sandra shook her head slowly as she wrapped gauze around his hands. "I don't know if you're a saint or an idiot." "Probably both," Caleb said with a weak smile. Morrison appeared at the ambulance doors, his face grim in the flashing emergency lights. Behind him, the collapsed tunnel smoldered, rescue vehicles scattered across the scene like toys dropped by a giant child. The eastern entrance, 2 miles away on the other side of the mountain, was reportedly in even worse shape. "Rowan," Morrison said, "we've got a problem." Caleb's stomach dropped. "How many?" 7 vehicles entered the tunnel in the 30 seconds before collapse. "We've accounted for yours and Lockhart's limo. That leaves 5 more. Probably 12 to 15 people total." Morrison's jaw tightened. "All buried under 50,000 tons of mountain." The weight of those numbers settled over Caleb like a physical thing. 12 to 15 people. 12 to 15 souls trapped in darkness, their air running out, their hope dying minute by minute. "The eastern entrance?" Caleb asked. "Sealed tighter than the western side. We've got crews bringing in heavy equipment, but the engineers are saying any attempt to dig could trigger a total collapse. The whole mountain is unstable now." "So what are you going to do?" Morrison looked away. "We wait. Hope the structure stabilizes. Bring in specialized equipment. Follow protocol." "Protocol?" Caleb repeated flatly. "How long will that take?" 48 hours minimum, maybe 72. "They'll be dead in 12. "I know." Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "But if we go in now, we could kill everyone. The people trapped inside and whoever we send in after them. I've got families to think about too. My firefighters have kids, wives, husbands. I can't ask them to—" "I'm not asking you to." Caleb stood up despite Sandra's protests. "I'm saying I'll go back in." "Absolutely not," Sandra said. "You're in no condition—" "Daddy, no!" Ellie's small voice cut through everything. She threw her arms around his waist, holding on with desperate strength. "You promised you'd come back. You promised." Caleb knelt down, bringing himself eye level with his daughter. In the harsh emergency lights, she looked so young, so terrified. Her mother had died when she was 3, Heart failure, sudden and cruel. Caleb was all she had left in the world. Sweetheart, there are people in there. People like Miss Vivian who need— I don't care about them, Ellie shouted, tears streaming down her face. I care about you. You already saved someone. You already did the brave thing. Let someone else do it now. Ellie, no! She was sobbing now, her small body shaking. Mommy left and you said she didn't want to, but she had to. And then Uncle Tommy left and you said it wasn't his fault, but he's never coming back. And now you want to leave too, and I'll be all alone. And I don't want to be alone, Daddy. Please don't leave me alone. The words hit Caleb like physical blows. He pulled Ellie close, feeling her tears soak into his filthy shirt, feeling her heart racing against his chest. She was 7 years old. She'd already lost too much. And here he was, ready to risk leaving her completely orphaned. Morrison spoke quietly. The kid's right, Rowan. You've done enough, more than enough. Let the professionals handle it from here. But even as he said it, both men knew the truth. There were no professionals who could navigate that tunnel better than Caleb. No one who knew its layout as intimately, who could read the mountain's moods the way 15 years underground had taught him. If there was any chance of saving those people, it rested on Caleb's shoulders. And that knowledge felt like drowning. Give me an hour, Caleb said finally. 1 hour to get Ellie somewhere safe, to think this through. Then I'll give you my answer. Morrison nodded. 1 hour, but Rowan, the clock's ticking for the people inside. Every minute we delay. I know. Sandra drove them to the small house Caleb rented on the outskirts of Boulder, a 2-bedroom bungalow with a mortgage he could barely afford, and a yard where Ellie liked to chase butterflies in summer. She pulled into the driveway as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. I'll wait, Sandra said, in case you need anything. Caleb carried Ellie inside. She'd finally cried herself into exhaustion, her small body limp against his shoulder. He laid her on her bed, the one covered with stuffed animals and drawings she'd made of their family, back when it had included her mother. Back when the world had seemed safe. He pulled the covers up to her chin, brushed hair from her forehead, and turned to leave. Daddy? Her voice was small, half asleep. You're not going back in the tunnel, are you? Caleb stood frozen in her doorway. He could lie. Tell her he'd stay, that Morrison's crew would handle everything, that other people's lives weren't his responsibility. But he'd never lied to Ellie. Not when her mother died, not when Tommy died, not ever. I don't know yet, sweetheart. Because you think it's the right thing to do? Because I'm the only one who can. Ellie sat up in bed, her stuffed bear clutched to her chest. Uncle Tommy thought going into that tunnel was the only thing he could do too, and then he died and you were sad for a really long time. You still are sad sometimes. I see you looking at his picture. Caleb's throat tightened. Tommy was trying to help. And you're trying to help. And if you die, who's going to be sad for you? Me. Just me. All alone. She paused, her young voice cracking. Is that fair, Daddy? Is it fair that I have to lose you to save people I don't even know? The question hung in the air between them, terrible and true. No, Caleb admitted. It's not fair. Then don't go. He moved to her bedside, sitting on the edge of her mattress. What if I told you that there might be other little girls in that tunnel? Kids like you, scared and hurt, waiting for someone to help them. Are there? I don't know, maybe, probably. Ellie was quiet for a long moment, her fingers working at the bear's worn fur. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Would you come back? I came back last time. Promise you'd come back this time too? Caleb wanted to promise, wanted to give her that certainty, that guarantee, but he'd never lied to his daughter, and he wasn't going to start now. I promise I'll do everything I can to come back, he said carefully. But sweetie, sometimes things happen that we can't control. Sometimes, like with Mommy. Ellie hugged her bear tighter. If you don't come back, will they tell me? Or will they just say you're missing like they did with Uncle Tommy at first? They'll tell you. And who will I live with? Aunt Marie. In Denver. You like Aunt Marie. She's nice, but she's not you. Ellie's eyes filled with fresh tears. Nothing's the same without you. Caleb pulled her close, and they sat like that as dawn light began filtering through her curtains, painting her room in shades of gold and pink. Outside, he could hear Sandra's radio crackling with updates from the tunnel site. Finally, Ellie pulled back. "I know what Uncle Tommy would say." "What's that?" "He'd say that being scared is okay, but being scared doesn't mean you don't help people." She wiped her eyes. "I heard him tell you that once, after that time when you didn't want to go underground because of the cave-in at the Carter site." Caleb felt his breath catch. He'd forgotten about that conversation, Tommy gripping his shoulder, telling him that fear was healthy, but paralysis was death. "You're right," he said softly. "That's exactly what Tommy would say. So if you think you have to go, I understand." Ellie's voice shook but held steady. "But Daddy, if you go, you have to fight really, really hard to come back, harder than last time, because I need you more than those other people do." "I will, sweetheart. I promise I'll fight." "And Daddy, when you come back, because you're going to come back, can we go to the mountains, the safe ones, and look at the stars like we used to do with Mommy?" "Absolutely. First thing." Ellie hugged him one more time, fierce and tight. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, baby. So much." He tucked her back into bed, waited until her breathing evened out into sleep, then walked into the kitchen where Sandra was waiting with coffee she'd somehow made, despite being a stranger in his house. "You're going back in," she said. Not a question. "Yeah. And there's nothing I can say to stop you." "No." Sandra nodded slowly, accepting. "Then at least let me patch you up properly first, and eat something. You'll need the energy." While Sandra rebandaged his hands with professional efficiency, Caleb's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered to find a voice he'd never expected to hear again. "Mr. Rowan? This is Dr. Patricia Hammond. I'm the trauma surgeon treating Ms. Lockhart." Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. "Is she—" "She's stable. Critical, but stable. We're taking her into surgery in 20 minutes. She asked me to call you first." A pause. "She says she needs to speak with you. It's urgent." "I don't think—" "Mr. Rowan, she's insisting. She says she has information about the tunnel that could help with the rescue. She won't go into surgery until she talks to you." Caleb closed his eyes. Of course. Of course Vivian would have information. She'd approved every corner cut, every compromise, every decision that had turned the tunnel into a death trap. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said. The Boulder Medical Center was in chaos when Caleb arrived, still in his filthy clothes, his bandaged hands drawing stares from orderlies and patients alike. Dr. Hammond met him at the emergency entrance, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and the no-nonsense expression of someone who'd seen too much death to tolerate stupidity. "She's in Trauma Bay 3, Hammond said, leading him through sterile hallways. "But Mr. Rowan, I need you to understand something. Ms. Lockhart's condition is extremely serious. Compound fracture, crush injury to the lower leg, significant blood loss. We're likely looking at amputation below the knee." "She knows?" "Yes. And she's processing. Be gentle." But when Hammond pulled back the curtain to Trauma Bay 3, Vivian Lockhart looked anything but fragile. She was propped up in the hospital bed, her ruined leg elevated and swathed in temporary dressings, her face still dirt-streaked because they hadn't had time to clean her before surgery. But her eyes were sharp, focused, burning with an intensity that made Caleb stop short. 20 minutes until surgery, Vivian said, her voice hoarse but steady. "So listen fast. Ms. Lockhart, you should be resting." "I'll rest when I'm dead," which was supposed to be 3 hours ago. She locked eyes with Caleb. "You saved my life. Now I'm going to help you save theirs." Hammond checked Vivian's vitals one more time, frowned at the readings, but left them alone when Vivian waved her away impatiently. "The tunnel," Vivian said the moment the curtain closed. "I know why it collapsed." "Substandard construction," Caleb said flatly. "Cut corners. Ignored safety reports. I wrote about a dozen memos before your company fired me." "Yes, you did. And I ignored every single one." Vivian's jaw tightened. "But it's worse than that. The contractor, Meridian Construction, They didn't just cut corners. They falsified reports. The concrete used in the support columns, 50% weaker than specifications. The rebar, half the required density. And the foundation? She stopped, pain flickering across her face. The foundation was built on a fault line I knew about. A geological survey flagged it 2 years ago. I buried the report. Caleb felt cold spreading through his chest. Why? Because rerouting the tunnel would have added 18 months to the timeline and cost an additional $200 million. The board was threatening to remove me. My father was threatening to disown me. I was going to lose everything. Vivian's voice cracked. So I chose my career over people's lives, and now Marcus is dead. My driver. 15 years he worked for my family. He had grandchildren. I know. You know, you were in there. You saw. Vivian stopped, closed her eyes. Of course you saw. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the beeping of monitors and the distant wail of sirens as more emergency vehicles arrived for the growing disaster. There's a secondary access shaft, Vivian said finally, about a quarter mile from the western entrance. It was part of the original design for emergency ventilation. We sealed it during construction because it was deemed redundant, another cost-cutting measure. But the shaft is still there, and if it survived the collapse, it might provide a way to reach the central section without going through the main tunnel. Caleb leaned forward. Where exactly? Vivian reached for a tablet on her bedside table, wincing as the movement pulled at her injured leg. She pulled up architectural diagrams, her fingers shaking slightly as she navigated through files. Here, she said, turning the screen toward him. GPS coordinates are embedded in the file. The shaft is covered with a metal hatch disguised to look like natural rock. You'd never find it if you didn't know it was there. Caleb studied the diagram, his mind already calculating routes and possibilities. The shaft dropped 60 feet straight down to intersect with the tunnel at its midpoint, right near where he'd estimated people might be trapped. How wide is the shaft? 3 feet diameter, big enough for rescue personnel with equipment. And the structural integrity? It was built to the same substandard specifications as everything else. Vivian met his eyes. I won't lie to you, Mr. Rowan. It might not have survived the collapse. It might be completely sealed, or it might drop you 60 feet to your death when the support structure fails. But it's a chance. It's a chance. Caleb pulled out his phone to take photos of the diagrams. Why are you telling me this? You could have kept quiet. Let the investigation happen on its own timeline. By the time anyone found evidence of the access shaft, you'd have lawyers and time and... Because I'm done, Vivian said simply. Done lying, done covering up, done choosing money over human decency. She gestured at her ruined leg. I lost this because I valued profit over safety. I lost Marcus because I ignored warnings. How many more people have to die before I do the right thing? Your father will destroy you for this. Let him try. I'll destroy him first. Vivian's expression hardened. The moment I'm out of surgery, I'm calling a press conference. I'm going to tell them everything. The falsified reports, the buried geological surveys, the substandard materials, all of it. They'll crucify you. Good. I deserve it. She reached out, her hand finding Caleb's bandaged one. But those people in the tunnel, they don't deserve to die because of my mistakes. So please, Mr. Rowan, use that access shaft. Save them if you can. Dr. Hammond reappeared with 2 orderlies. Time's up. We need to take Ms. Lockhart to surgery now. Vivian held Caleb's gaze as they began wheeling her bed toward the operating room. Your daughter, she said. Ellie. She was outside the tunnel waiting for you, wasn't she? Yes. I have a daughter too, Lydia. I barely know her. I chose board meetings over birthday parties, acquisitions over soccer games. Don't make my mistakes, Mr. Rowan. Her voice broke. If you go back into that mountain, you come back out. For her. I'm trying. Try harder. Then she was gone, wheeled away to face whatever future awaited her, one likely involving amputation, investigations, criminal charges, and the complete destruction of everything she'd built her life around. And yet, in her hospital bed with her legs shattered and her empire crumbling, Vivian Lockhart had looked more at peace than she probably had in years. Caleb stood in the empty trauma bay, staring at the architectural diagrams on his phone, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on him like the mountain itself. He could give this information to Morrison, let the professional rescue teams handle it. That would be the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that would let him go home to Ellie and keep the promise he'd half made. Or he could do what Tommy would have done, what every instinct in his body screamed at him to do. His phone rang. Morrison. "Rowan, where are you? We've got seismic readings showing another potential collapse in the next 6 to 8 hours. If you're going back in, it has to be now." "I'm at the hospital. I have information, a secondary access shaft that might provide a safe route to the trapped vehicles." "Where?" Caleb gave him the coordinates. "I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. "Rowan, 20 minutes, Chief." He hung up and dialed another number. His sister Marie answered on the second ring, her voice fuzzy with sleep. "Caleb? It's 5 in the morning. I need you to come get Ellie. Right now." The tone of his voice must have communicated everything, because Marie's response was immediate and focused. "Where is she?" "At the house, with a paramedic named Sandra. I need you to take Ellie to your place. Keep her safe, and if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." "Marie? No." His sister's voice was fierce. "I've already lost Tommy. I'm not losing you too. So whatever stupid, heroic thing you're about to do, you're going to do it carefully, and you're going to come home." "I'm going to try." "Don't try. Do it. Ellie needs you. I need you." Marie's voice softened. "And that little girl has already lost too much. Don't you dare make her lose you too." "I love you, sis." "I love you too, you idiot. Now go save people and then come home." Caleb drove back to his house in the growing dawn light, the city of Boulder waking up around him, people starting their normal days with no idea that 12 to 15 souls were dying beneath a mountain just 30 miles away. Sandra was still waiting in his kitchen, nursing cold coffee and monitoring radio chatter. She looked up when he entered, reading his decision in his face. "You're going back." "I'm going back. My sister's coming for Ellie. Can you stay until she gets here?" "Of course." Caleb moved toward Ellie's room to say goodbye, but Sandra caught his arm. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't wake her. Let her remember you tucking her in, telling her you love her. Don't give her a goodbye. She'll replay in her mind if things go wrong." Caleb's chest tightened. "That's dark. That's reality. I've seen too many last goodbyes. They stick with people." Sandra squeezed his arm. "So don't say goodbye. Just go do what you have to do and come back to tell her good morning." She was right. Caleb knew she was right. He moved to Ellie's doorway anyway, watching his daughter sleep in the pale morning light. Her stuffed bear had fallen to the floor. He picked it up gently, tucked it back into her arms, and whispered words she couldn't hear. "I'll come back, baby. I promise I'll fight to come back." Then he walked out of his house, climbed into Sandra's paramedic vehicle, and let her drive him back toward the mountain that had already tried to kill him once. Morrison was waiting at the coordinates Vivian had provided, along with 2 other firefighters and a structural engineer named David Chen. No relation to Tommy, but the coincidence of the name felt like a message from the universe. "There," David said, pointing to what looked like natural rock formation about 50 yards up the mountainside. "If the diagrams are accurate, the access shaft is underneath that." They climbed carefully, aware that the entire mountain was unstable. When they reached the location, Caleb ran his hands over the rock surface, finding what his eyes couldn't see: the faint outline of a metal hatch, painted and weathered to match the surrounding stone. "Here," he said. Morrison and his crew used pry bars to force the hatch open. It gave way with a shriek of protesting metal, revealing a vertical shaft descending into darkness. The smell that rose from it was damp earth and concrete dust, and underneath that, something else: the metallic tang of fresh collapse. "The shaft survived," David said, shining a flashlight down. "I can see the bottom. 60 feet, looks stable. But—" He paused, his light finding something. "There's debris at the bottom. Part of the tunnel collapsed into the shaft during the main cave-in." "How much debris?" Caleb asked. "Maybe 10 feet worth. Could be cleared, but it'll take time, and any vibration could bring down more." Morrison turned to Caleb. "This is insane. Even with this access point, we're talking about dropping into an active collapse zone with minimal support and no backup route. I know. If the structure fails while you're down there, I know, Chief. Then why? Because Tommy taught me that you don't count the cost until after everyone's safe. Caleb began strapping on climbing gear that Morrison's crew had brought. And because there are kids down there, I heard children crying on the seismic monitors during the drive over. That was a lie. He hadn't heard anything, but Morrison didn't need to know that. Morrison helped him secure the harness, checking each connection twice. We'll have a rope on you the whole way down. Any sign of structural failure, we pull you out immediately. No arguments. Understood. And Rowan, your daughter's at home waiting for you. Don't make her wait forever. Caleb nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. They lowered him into the shaft slowly, the rope creaking with his weight. The walls were rough concrete, damp to the touch, showing signs of stress fractures that made David's earlier assessment of stable seem generous at best. 60 feet had never felt longer. When Caleb's feet finally touched the debris pile at the bottom, he unclipped from the safety line and assessed his situation. The shaft had intersected with the tunnel at almost exactly the spot Vivian had indicated, right near the old service alcove. But the tunnel itself was barely recognizable. The collapse had transformed the passage into something from a nightmare. Walls were buckled, ceiling partially caved in, debris scattered everywhere. And somewhere in this chaos, people were dying. Caleb pulled out his flashlight and began to dig. The debris at the bottom of the access shaft wasn't just concrete and steel, it was the physical manifestation of every corner Vivian Lockhart had cut, every warning Caleb had written that went ignored, every decision that valued time and money over human life. He began moving it piece by piece, his bandaged hands screaming in protest, sweat already soaking through his shirt despite the cool underground air. Above him, Morrison's voice crackled through the radio clipped to Caleb's belt. Rowan, seismic readings are showing micro tremors. The structure is actively settling. You've got maybe 4 hours before we have to pull you out whether you found anyone or not. 4 hours. Caleb didn't bother responding. 4 hours to search a 2-mile collapsed tunnel for survivors who might already be dead. The math was impossible, but then again, so was everything else about this night. He cleared enough debris to squeeze through into the main tunnel, and immediately his flashlight beam found something that made his blood run cold. A child's shoe. Small, pink, with cartoon characters on the side. Just one shoe, lying in the dust like an accusation. "Hello?" Caleb called out, his voice swallowed by the oppressive darkness. "Can anyone hear me? If you can hear me, make noise. Bang on something." Silence answered him. Then, just as he was about to move forward, a sound so faint he almost missed it. A whimper. Human. Afraid. Alive. Caleb ran toward it, scrambling over twisted metal and shattered concrete, his flashlight beam cutting wild arcs through the dust-thick air. The whimpering grew louder, more distinct, and then he saw them. A silver Honda Civic, crushed but not completely flattened, wedged between two massive concrete slabs that had fallen in a way that created a small pocket of survivable space. Through the shattered rear window, Caleb could see movement. "Hey!" he shouted, dropping to his knees beside the car. "Hey, I'm here to help! How many of you are in there?" A face appeared in the window. A woman, maybe 30, her forehead bleeding, her eyes wide with shock and terror. "3," she gasped. "Me and my 2 kids. Oh God, you're real. I thought no one was coming. I'm real. I'm getting you out. What's your name?" "Jessica. Jessica Morales." She started crying, her whole body shaking. "My babies, my kids are hurt. Emma won't stop crying and Michael won't wake up." Caleb's heart clenched. "How old are they?" "Emma's 5, Michael's 8. Please, he hit his head when we crashed and he won't wake up, and I don't know what to do." "Okay, Jessica, listen to me. I need you to stay calm. I'm going to get you out, but I need you to tell me exactly what's pinning the car." Jessica twisted in her seat, trying to assess the damage. There's a concrete beam across the hood, and the roof is pushed down. I can't open any of the doors. The windows, only the back one is broken enough to crawl through, but it's too small for me, and I can't leave my kids." Caleb examined the car's position. The concrete beam across the hood was massive, easily several tons, supported only by the car's crumpled frame. If he disturbed it wrong, the whole thing could shift and crush the vehicle completely. But the rear window, Jessica was right. It was too small for an adult, but a child could fit. Jessica, I need you to pass Emma out to me through the back window. Can you do that? But Michael, we'll get Michael too. But Emma first, one at a time. Can Emma move on her own? She's scared and her arm hurts, but she can move. Good. Get her to the back window, now. Caleb heard shuffling inside the car, heard Emma crying, heard Jessica's voice trying to soothe her daughter with words that shook with barely controlled panic. Then a small face appeared at the broken window, a little girl with dark curls and tear-streaked cheeks, her left arm cradled against her chest. Hi, Emma, Caleb said softly, making his voice as gentle as he could. My name's Caleb. I have a daughter, just like you. Her name's Ellie. She'd want me to help you, okay? Emma nodded, hiccuping through her tears. I'm going to pull you out through this window. It might hurt a little, but I promise I'll be as careful as I can. Can you be brave for me? I want my mommy, Emma whispered. I know, sweetie. And your mommy's right here. She's going to come out right after you. But you first, okay? It took 5 agonizing minutes to maneuver Emma through the narrow opening, her cries of pain cutting through Caleb like knives every time her injured arm bumped against something. When she was finally free, he set her down gently in the clearest spot he could find and quickly checked her over with his flashlight. Her left arm was definitely broken, bent at an unnatural angle, and she had cuts and bruises everywhere, but nothing immediately life-threatening. You did so good, Emma, Caleb said, pulling off his jacket and wrapping it around her small, shivering body. Now I need you to stay right here while I get your brother, okay? Can you do that? Emma nodded, clutching Caleb's jacket around herself. Caleb turned back to the car. Jessica, tell me about Michael. You said he won't wake up? He's breathing, but it's shallow. There's blood. There's so much blood from his head. Jessica's voice rose toward hysteria. He needs a hospital. He needs help. Oh, God, what if he's dying? He's not dying. Not today. But I need you to focus for me. Can you physically move him to the back window? I think so. He's small for his age, but if I move him and his neck is injured, I know it's risky, but we don't have a choice. The tunnel's unstable. We need to get all of you out now. The process of extracting Michael was terrifying. He was indeed small for 8 years old, limp and unresponsive as Jessica maneuvered his body toward the rear window with agonizing care. Blood matted his dark hair, and when Caleb got his hands on the boy and pulled him free, he could feel how dangerously shallow Michael's breathing was. Concussion. Definitely concussion. Possibly worse. The kid needed a trauma center, not a collapsed tunnel, and a former mine worker with basic first aid training. Caleb laid Michael next to his sister, checking his pupils with the flashlight. One pupil was significantly more dilated than the other. Not good. Really not good. Emma, Caleb said, I need you to talk to your brother. Tell him stories. Tell him about your favorite things. Keep talking to him no matter what, okay? Will it help? Yes, Caleb lied. It'll help a lot. He turned back to the car. Jessica was trying to squeeze through the rear window herself, but her hips were too wide. She pushed and twisted, panic giving her strength, but physics didn't care about desperation. I can't fit, she sobbed. I can't. Then we make the opening bigger. Caleb grabbed his pry bar and began attacking the window frame, bending the metal outward, creating more space. The car groaned ominously as he worked, the concrete beam above it shifting slightly. Faster, Jessica begged. Please, faster. The beam shifted again. Dust rained down. Caleb worked faster, ignoring the screaming in his hands, ignoring the way blood was seeping through his bandages. The opening grew another few inches. Maybe enough. Now! Caleb grabbed Jessica's arms and pulled. She screamed as the metal scraped her hips, tore her clothes, cut her skin. But then she was through, tumbling out of the car and into Caleb's arms just as the concrete beam gave way completely. The car collapsed with a grinding shriek of metal, the space where Jessica had been sitting crushed flat in an instant. If she'd still been inside, but she wasn't. They all weren't. All three of them were out, alive, and Caleb had to get them to safety before the tunnel decided to finish what it had started. "Can you walk?" he asked Jessica. She nodded, already crawling toward her children, gathering Emma and Michael into her arms. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you, thank you. Thank me when we're topside. Come on." But even as he said it, Caleb heard something that made his stomach drop. Another whimper, distant but distinct, coming from further into the tunnel. More survivors. Jessica heard it too. Her eyes went wide. "Someone else is in here?" "Stay with your kids," Caleb ordered. He grabbed his radio. "Morrison, I've got 3 survivors, mother and 2 children, 1 critical. I'm sending them up the access shaft now. Have medical standing by." "Copy that. What's your status?" "I hear more survivors deeper in. I'm going after them." "Negative, Rowan. Get those people out first, then we reassess." "There's no time to reassess. Every minute we waste is a minute someone's dying." Caleb was already moving, his flashlight scanning deeper into the tunnel's darkness. "Rowan, the seismic readings—" "I don't care about the readings." He found Jessica staring at him with something like awe and terror mixed together. "You're going further in after you already saved us? People need help. You're crazy." "Yeah, I get that a lot today." Caleb guided Jessica and her children toward the access shaft, helping Emma walk on shaky legs while Jessica carried Michael's limp form. When they reached the shaft, Caleb called up to Morrison's team. "3 coming up. Kid with head trauma needs immediate evac." Ropes lowered. Morrison's firefighters began the careful process of hauling up survivors. Emma went first, crying but brave. Then Jessica, still carrying Michael, secured in a rescue harness that would keep them both safe during the ascent. As they disappeared up the shaft, Emma's voice drifted down. "Thank you, Mr. Caleb. Thank you for saving us." And then they were gone, and Caleb was alone in the darkness again. He turned deeper into the tunnel, following the sound of distant crying. His radio crackled with Morrison's voice, urgent now. "Rowan, we've got the Morales family. The boy's critical but stable. You need to extract now. We're seeing increased seismic activity." "How long do I have?" 2 hours, maybe less." "Then I'd better move fast." Caleb pushed deeper into the collapsed tunnel, the devastation growing worse with every step. He found 2 more vehicles crushed completely flat. No chance of survivors there, nothing but metal pancakes that had once been someone's car, someone's commute home, someone's life. He didn't let himself think about how many bodies might be in those flattened wrecks. Then his flashlight found what he was looking for. A white Tesla, newer model, trapped beneath a partially collapsed support column. But unlike the previous vehicles, this one had maintained some structural integrity. The column had fallen across the hood at an angle, held up by a concrete slab that had wedged itself in just the right position. And from inside the Tesla, Caleb could hear crying. Not a child's cry. An adult's. Broken. Hopeless. The sound of someone who'd given up. "Hey!" Caleb banged on the Tesla's rear window. "Can you hear me?" The crying stopped. Then a man's face appeared, pressed against the window. He was maybe 50, wearing a business suit now covered in blood and dust. His expression one of complete disbelief. "You're real," the man whispered. "Oh God, you're actually real. I thought, after the first collapse, I thought everyone outside was dead too." "I'm real and I'm getting you out. What's your name?" "David. David Chen." Caleb froze. Chen. Like Tommy. Like the structural engineer up top. A common enough name, but the universe seemed determined to haunt him with it today. "Are you injured, David?" "My leg. I think it's broken. And my wife—" David's voice cracked. "My wife is in the front seat. She's unconscious. She won't wake up. There's so much blood." Caleb moved to the front of the vehicle, shining his light through the windshield. A woman lay slumped against the deployed airbag, her head at an unnatural angle, blood covering the side of her face. He couldn't tell if she was breathing. "David, I need you to check your wife's pulse. Can you reach her from where you are?" "I've been trying. I can't reach. My leg won't move. I can't get to her." David's voice rose toward panic. "Is she dead? Oh God, is my wife dead?" Caleb examined the vehicle's position. The support column was massive, crushing the hood and engine block. But the Tesla's reinforced frame had held just enough to keep the passenger compartment from complete collapse. Getting them out would require either moving that column, impossible, or cutting through the vehicle to extract them from behind. He had neither the equipment nor the time for that. But the sunroof. He aimed his flashlight up and saw it. Cracked, partially collapsed, but not completely closed. Maybe just big enough for a person to squeeze through. "David, your sunroof. Can you open it from inside?" "It's electric. The car's dead." Of course it was. Caleb climbed onto the vehicle's roof, ignoring how the whole structure groaned under his added weight. He began working at the sunroof with his pry bar, creating an opening, widening it inch by inch. The tempered glass fought him, but eventually gave way. When the opening was finally large enough, Caleb lowered himself partway through. "David, I'm going to get your wife out first. Then you, okay?" "But my leg, I can't move." "If you take her first, what if the car collapses?" "It won't. Trust me." That was a lie. The car could absolutely collapse. But David's wife was unconscious and possibly dying, while David was conscious and stable. The choice was clear, even if it was cruel. Caleb maneuvered himself fully into the vehicle, the tight space making every movement difficult. He reached the front seat and pressed his fingers against the woman's neck, searching for a pulse. There. Faint, thready, but present. She was alive. "She's alive, David. She has a pulse." David sobbed with relief. "Thank God. Oh, thank God." Getting the woman out through the sunroof was a nightmare. She was dead weight, unconscious, her body limp and unresponsive. Caleb had to support her entirely as he lifted her up and out, his muscles screaming, his injured hands leaving blood on her clothes. When he finally got her onto the roof, he laid her down as gently as possible and checked her over with his flashlight. Head wound, definitely serious. Possible skull fracture. Breathing shallow, but present. She needed a hospital 10 minutes ago. "Your turn, David," Caleb called down through the sunroof. "I can't. My leg, it's pinned under the dash." Caleb lowered himself back into the vehicle, squeezing into the back seat beside David. The man's right leg was indeed trapped, wedged under the collapsed dashboard at an angle that must have been agony. "How bad is the pain?" Caleb asked. I can handle it, but I can't feel my foot. That's bad, right? That's really bad." "Let's worry about getting you out first, then we'll deal with the rest." Caleb examined the dashboard, looking for a way to free David's leg without causing further injury. The metal was twisted, compressed, unyielding. He pulled out his pry bar and began working at the dashboard, trying to create space. David gasped with pain as the pressure shifted. "I know it hurts," Caleb said, "but I need to move this to get you free." "It's okay. Just do it fast." Caleb worked the pry bar with everything he had, his hands screaming in protest, fresh blood soaking through his bandages. The dashboard gave way inch by inch, slowly releasing its grip on David's leg. Then the mountain groaned. It was a sound Caleb knew intimately, the sound of structure failing, of physics reasserting itself, of time running out. The support column above them shifted, dust rained down. The Tesla's roof buckled inward with a sharp crack. "We're out of time," Caleb said. "I'm going to pull you free on 3. It's going to hurt like hell, but if we don't go now, we don't go at all." "Do it," David said through gritted teeth. 1. Caleb got his hands under David's arms. 2. He braced himself. 3. He pulled with everything he had. David screamed as his leg tore free, the sound echoing through the dead tunnel like something primal and terrible. But then David was free, and Caleb was dragging him toward the sunroof, pushing him up and out just as the support column gave way completely. The Tesla collapsed with a shriek of metal. The space where they'd just been sitting compressed to nothing. Caleb scrambled up through the sunroof, hauling David after him, both of them rolling off the roof just as the entire vehicle was crushed flat beneath tons of concrete. They lay there in the dust and darkness, gasping, both of them shaking with adrenaline and terror and the impossible reality of still being alive. "You saved us," David finally whispered. "You actually saved us." "Not yet. We still have to get out." But even as Caleb said it, he heard new sounds from deeper in the tunnel. More crying, more calls for help, more people dying while he caught his breath. His radio crackled. Morrison's voice was tight with stress. "Rowan, I've got David and his wife Chen coming up now. His wife's critical. They're rushing her to the hospital. But Rowan, you need to extract immediately. We're seeing massive seismic activity. The tunnel's going to collapse again. You've got 30 minutes, maximum. 30 minutes. Caleb looked deeper into the tunnel, his flashlight beam picking out more crushed vehicles, more debris, more possible survivors. He could go back now. He'd saved 6 people. 6 people who would have died without him. That was enough. That was more than enough. Ellie was waiting for him. Marie was watching his daughter, praying for him to come home. He could climb that access shaft and see daylight again, or he could go deeper into hell. Tommy's voice echoed in his memory. We save people, Caleb. That's who we are, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Caleb stood up, his body protesting every movement. He grabbed his flashlight and started moving deeper into the tunnel. Rowan! Morrison's voice exploded through the radio. Did you hear me? 30 minutes. You need to extract now. Copy that, Caleb said. But there are still people in here. Rowan, I'm not leaving them. He heard Morrison swear, heard the chief arguing with someone. Probably the incident commander trying to order an evacuation. But Caleb had already moved beyond the range where orders mattered. His flashlight found another vehicle, a motorcycle. The rider pinned beneath it, conscious but trapped. Caleb worked to free him, lifting the bike with strength he didn't know he had left, pulling the man clear. Broken ribs, definitely. Maybe punctured lung, but alive. Can you walk? Caleb asked. I think so, the man gasped. Then get to the access shaft, 1/4 mile that way. Other people coming up behind me. Tell them what? That Caleb was staying until everyone was out or the mountain killed him? Just get out. The man stumbled away into the darkness and Caleb pushed forward. He found a young couple in a Mini Cooper, both conscious, both terrified, trapped by debris but not seriously injured. He dug them out, sent them toward the access shaft. He found an elderly man in a Subaru, unconscious but breathing, alone. Caleb carried him fireman style back toward the shaft, his legs threatening to give out with every step, his vision starting to blur from exhaustion. At the shaft, Morrison's crew had set up a triage station. A paramedic took the elderly man from Caleb's arms. How many more? The paramedic asked. I don't know. At least 3 more vehicles I saw. Maybe survivors in them. Maybe not. Rowan! Morrison's voice cut through, and Caleb looked up to see the fire chief descending the access shaft himself, his face furious. I gave you an order to extract. Can't do that, Chief. Like hell you can't. The seismic readings, I know what the readings say, but there are still people down here. Morrison grabbed Caleb's shoulders, forcing eye contact. Listen to me. You've saved 9 people. 9 people who would be dead without you. That's a miracle. Don't throw your life away trying to make it 10. It's not 10. It's however many are left. Caleb pulled free from Morrison's grip. And I'm not leaving until they're out, or I physically can't move anymore. Your daughter. My daughter knows who I am. She knows I save people, even when it's hard. Caleb's voice broke. Especially when it's hard. Morrison stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I'm going with you. Chief, you're not arguing, you're exhausted, you're injured, and you're going to get yourself killed if you go back in alone. Morrison checked his own equipment. Besides, I didn't become a firefighter to let civilians do my job for me. They went back into the tunnel together, their flashlights cutting twin beams through the darkness. Caleb's legs felt like they were made of lead, his hands were agony, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a full breath that wasn't choked with dust. But there were still people who needed saving. They found a delivery van on its side, the driver already dead. They could tell without even checking from the angle of his neck. But in the back of the van, they found a maintenance worker who'd been hitching a ride, trapped but alive. They cut him free, sent him toward the shaft. The mountain groaned again, longer this time, deeper. The sound of something fundamental giving way. We're out of time, Morrison said quietly. One more sweep, just one more. Rowan. One more. They pushed forward, and that's when they found it. The last vehicle, a blue Mazda sedan, crushed beneath what looked like the entire ceiling. No way anyone could have survived that level of compression. But then they heard it, singing, soft, trembling, afraid. A woman's voice singing a lullaby, and beneath it, a child's voice joining in. Caleb and Morrison ran. The Mazda was buried so deep under debris they could barely see it, but the singing was definitely coming from inside. Somehow, miraculously, a pocket had formed. Some random configuration of fallen concrete that had created a space just large enough for survival. "Hello!" Caleb shouted, dropping to his knees beside the debris pile. "Can you hear us?" The singing stopped. "Yes!" A woman's voice, thick with tears. "Yes, we're here. We're trapped. Please help us." "How many of you?" "2. Me and my daughter. She's 4. We've been singing to stay calm, but I don't know how much longer. Hold on, we're getting you out." But even as Caleb said it, he could see the problem. The debris pile was massive, unstable, and any attempt to dig through it could trigger a collapse that would kill everyone. They needed time, equipment, a plan. They had none of those things. The mountain groaned again, and this time chunks of concrete fell from the ceiling. Not many, not yet, but the warning was clear. Morrison grabbed his radio. "All personnel evacuate immediately. The structure is failing. I repeat, all personnel evacuate now." "Chief, we can't leave them," Caleb started. "I'm not suggesting we leave them. I'm ordering everyone else out so they don't die when this place comes down." Morrison turned to Caleb. "But you and me? We're staying." "You don't have to be Neither do you, but we're both idiots, so here we are." Morrison began examining the debris pile, looking for the safest way to create an opening. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before this whole section collapses. Maybe less. So let's make them count." They worked together, moving concrete with bare hands when the pry bars wouldn't fit, ignoring how their palms bled, ignoring how their lungs burned from dust, ignoring how the mountain kept groaning its warnings. Caleb thought about Ellie, about her small face watching him leave, about the promise he'd made to come back. But he also thought about the 4-year-old girl trapped in that car, singing lullabies with her mother because they thought they were going to die alone in the dark. If he died getting them out, at least Ellie would know her father died saving a little girl just like her. The debris pile shifted. For a terrible moment, Caleb thought the whole thing was coming down. But then he realized they'd created an opening, small, barely a foot wide, but there. "I see you," the woman inside shouted. "I can see your light." "Can you reach the opening?" Morrison called. "I think, yes. Yes, if I can get Sarah unbuckled. Do it fast." Seconds ticked by like hours. The mountain groaned continuously now, no longer just settling but actively failing. Dust rained from above in steady streams. Somewhere in the distance, something massive collapsed with a roar that shook the ground. Then a small hand appeared through the opening, a child's hand reaching desperately toward the light. Caleb grabbed it. "I've got you. Hold on." He pulled, and a little girl emerged from the debris. 4 years old with blonde curls and blue eyes and a frozen backpack still strapped to her back despite everything. She was crying, terrified, but alive. "Mommy!" she screamed, reaching back toward the opening. "I'm coming, baby!" The woman's face appeared in the gap, and Caleb and Morrison grabbed her arms and pulled. She was stuck, the opening too narrow, but they pulled harder, ignoring her screams as concrete scraped away skin. Then she was free, tumbling out with her daughter, both of them crying and holding each other. "Run!" Morrison shouted. "All of you, run for the access shaft now!" They ran. Caleb carried the little girl because her mother was limping, her leg injured. Morrison supported the mother. Behind them, the tunnel began to collapse in earnest, not just settling anymore, but actively destroying itself in a chain reaction of failure. The access shaft was ahead. Caleb could see it, could see his salvation, and Ellie's father coming home and all the things he'd promised himself if he survived. But the mountain had other plans. A support column directly ahead gave way with a crack like thunder. The ceiling came down, tons of concrete falling in a wall of destruction that sealed off the access shaft completely. They skidded to a stop, staring at the impassable barrier that now stood between them and escape. "No," Caleb whispered. "No, there has to be. The service alcove!" Morrison grabbed Caleb's arm. "The emergency ventilation shaft. If it survived the collapse..." They changed direction, running toward where Caleb remembered the alcove being. The little girl sobbed against his shoulder. Her mother stumbled, fell, got up, and kept running. Behind them, the tunnel was erasing itself from existence in a crescendo of destruction. And there it was, the service alcove, partially crushed but still standing, and in its center the narrow ventilation shaft that Vivian had mentioned. The same shaft he'd told Morrison about when planning the first rescue. It was barely 20 inches wide. Adults would never fit, but a 4-year-old girl would. Caleb set the girl down and looked at her mother. "What's your name?" "Rebecca. Rebecca Shaw." "Rebecca, this shaft goes up to the surface. It's narrow, but your daughter can fit. We'll send her up first, then..." "Then what?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Then you leave me here to die, while my baby goes up alone and scared?" "Then we figure out another way," Morrison said, but his voice carried no conviction. There was no other way. They all knew it. Rebecca dropped to her knees in front of her daughter. "Sarah, baby, remember how we talked about being brave?" "I don't want to be brave," Sarah sobbed. "I want to stay with you." "I know, sweetie, but this nice man is going to help you climb up this tunnel, and at the top there will be people who will take care of you, and Mommy will..." Her voice broke. "Mommy will come get you as soon as she can." "Promise?" Rebecca pulled her daughter close, and Caleb had to look away from the naked pain in her face. "I promise to try my hardest, baby. I promise to fight." Caleb's hands were shaking as he helped lift Sarah into the ventilation shaft. The little girl cried, reaching back for her mother, but Caleb kept her moving upward, coaching her through the climb. "That's it, Sarah. You're doing great. Keep going. Reach for the next handhold. You're so brave. So brave." Sarah's cries faded as she climbed higher, and finally Caleb heard shouts from above. She'd made it. Someone had grabbed her, pulled her out into daylight and safety. 1 saved, 3 still trapped. Morrison was already on his radio, calling in their position, but the response was full of static and breaking up. The interference from the collapse was too severe. "Anyone reading me? We're trapped at the service alcove. Access shaft is blocked. We need..." Static drowned him out. The tunnel groaned one final time, and then the mountain came down. Caleb threw himself over Rebecca as the ceiling came down, Morrison doing the same, their bodies becoming shields against tons of concrete and steel that wanted them dead. The roar was absolute, not just sound but physical force that rattled teeth and stopped breath and erased everything except the certainty of ending. Then silence. Not complete silence. Caleb could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, could hear Morrison's labored breathing beside him, could hear Rebecca sobbing beneath him. But the roar had stopped, replaced by the steady patter of dust settling and the occasional groan of stressed metal finding new equilibrium. Caleb opened his eyes to absolute darkness. His flashlight was gone, knocked from his hand during the collapse. He couldn't see anything, couldn't tell if they were buried completely or if some pocket of space remained. "Morrison?" His voice came out as a croak. "Here. Still breathing. You?" "Yeah. Rebecca?" Rebecca's sob was answer enough. She was alive, traumatized, probably injured, but alive. Caleb carefully shifted his weight off her, feeling around in the darkness. His hands found concrete above him, close, maybe 2 feet from his face. To his left, more concrete. To his right, something that might have been a gap or might have been wishful thinking. "Don't move too much," Morrison said, his voice tight with pain. "We don't know how stable this pocket is. Any shift could bring the rest down on us." "Are you hurt?" "My leg. Something heavy landed on it. Can't feel anything below the knee." That wasn't good. That was actually terrible. But Caleb pushed the panic down and focused on immediate concerns. "Rebecca, are you injured?" "I don't know. I don't think so. My daughter, did Sarah make it out? Please tell me she made it out." "She made it," Caleb said firmly. "I heard the rescue team grab her. She's safe." Rebecca's sob this time was relief mixed with grief. Her daughter was safe, but she was buried alive with 2 strangers beneath a mountain that had already tried to kill them multiple times. Caleb felt around in the darkness, trying to understand their situation. They were in some kind of cavity created by the collapse. Probably the service alcove's reinforced walls had held just enough to prevent them from being crushed completely. But they were sealed in, no obvious exits, no way out. His fingers found something smooth and metallic, his flashlight, miraculously intact. He clicked it on and immediately wished he hadn't. The space they occupied was maybe 6 feet across and 4 feet high, barely enough room to sit up, let alone move. Concrete hemmed them in on all sides except for one corner where the rubble seemed less dense. The ventilation shaft that had saved Sarah was completely sealed now, tons of debris blocking it from this side. Morrison's leg was pinned beneath a concrete beam, the same kind of injury Vivian had suffered. Blood pooled beneath it, dark and spreading. The fire chief's face was gray with pain and shock. "How bad?" Morrison asked, seeing Caleb's expression. "I've seen worse." Another lie. Caleb had seen plenty of injuries underground, and Morrison's leg looked like it might cost him everything below the knee if they didn't get medical attention soon. "You're a terrible liar, Rowan." "Yeah, I get that a lot today." Rebecca was curled against the far wall, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking with shock. "We're going to die down here," she whispered. "Sarah's going to grow up without a mother, and we're going to die in the dark, and—" "We're not dying," Caleb said with more confidence than he felt. "They know where we are. They heard Morrison's radio call. They're going to dig us out." "How long will that take?" Caleb didn't answer, because the truth was too cruel. Even if rescue crews worked around the clock with heavy equipment, reaching them through this much debris could take days, and they had hours of breathable air at best. Morrison seemed to be doing the same math. "Rowan, in my jacket pocket, there's a radio. The main one's busted, but I've got a backup." Caleb found the radio and clicked it on. Nothing but static. He adjusted frequencies, tried different channels. More static. The concrete and rock around them was too dense, the interference too severe. "Keep trying," Morrison said. "Every few minutes. Eventually you might punch through." "Right. Eventually." Caleb set the radio down and examined their prison more carefully with his flashlight. The corner where the rubble seemed less dense, that was their best chance. If he could move enough debris, create even a small opening, they might be able to signal their position or access clearer air. He began working at the rubble, moving stones and chunks of concrete one piece at a time. Every movement raised dust that choked their already limited air supply, but sitting still meant dying slowly instead of quickly. Rebecca watched him work for a few minutes, then spoke quietly. "You're the man who saved Vivian Lockhart, aren't you? I saw you on the news before we left Denver. They were calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who was in the right place." "You could have left her. Everyone knows she ignored safety warnings, that she's responsible for this disaster. You could have walked away and let her die, and no one would have blamed you." "I would have blamed me." Caleb paused in his digging, his bandaged hands screaming. "My partner died in a tunnel Lockhart Industries built. Tommy Chen. He was knocking on the cave-in for 6 hours before we had to give up on reaching him. I heard every knock, counted every minute, and I swore that if I ever heard someone knocking again, I'd answer, no matter who they were." "That's why you came back for us," Rebecca said softly. "Because of your partner." "Because of Tommy, because of my daughter, because of a lot of reasons that made sense 6 hours ago and seem completely insane now that I'm buried alive." Morrison laughed, a rough, pained sound. "You're something else, Rowan. Most people run from danger. You run toward it carrying a pry bar and daddy issues." "I don't have daddy issues." "Everyone has daddy issues. It's the human condition." Morrison shifted slightly, then gasped as pain lanced through his trapped leg. "Jesus." "Okay, not moving again." Caleb returned to the radio, trying different frequencies. Nothing. Just endless static and the occasional burst of interference that might have been voices or might have been his imagination creating hope from white noise. He went back to digging at the rubble pile. 1 stone, 2 stones, a chunk of concrete, a twisted piece of rebar. The pile seemed endless, infinite, mocking him with its mass. Rebecca finally stood up, or as close to standing as the 4-foot ceiling allowed, and moved beside him. "Let me help." "You should conserve your energy." "For what? Sitting here thinking about how my daughter's up there without me? How she's probably terrified and alone and wondering if her mommy's dead?" Rebecca's voice broke. "I I need to do something or I'm going to lose my mind. They worked together in silence, Morrison coaching them from his pinned position, warning them when they pulled at stones that might destabilize the pocket. It was slow, exhausting work made worse by the stifling heat and diminishing air quality. Caleb's head was starting to pound, his thoughts growing fuzzy around the edges. Oxygen deprivation. They were running out of breathable air. "Tell me about your daughter," Rebecca said suddenly, her voice cutting through the sound of shifting rubble. "Ellie, right? You mentioned her name." "Yeah, Ellie. She's 7, smart as hell, braver than I'll ever be, and way too good at guilt-tripping me into making better choices." "Like not dying in a collapsed tunnel?" "Especially not dying in a collapsed tunnel. She's already lost her mother. I'm all she's got left." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, moving stones. "What happened to her mother, if you don't mind me asking?" "Heart condition. Sudden cardiac arrest when Ellie was 3. One minute Amanda was making breakfast, the next she was on the floor, and nothing we did—" Caleb's throat tightened. "Nothing we did made any difference. She was just gone. I'm sorry." "Me too." Caleb pulled at a larger piece of concrete, his muscles trembling with exhaustion. "But Ellie got through it. She's resilient. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for." "Sarah's not resilient. She's 4. She's going to be destroyed if I don't make it out of here." "Then we make it out of here." But Caleb said it with such conviction that for a moment even he believed it might be true. Morrison spoke up from his position against the wall, his voice weaker now. "Rowan, the radio. Try again." Caleb grabbed the radio, clicked through frequencies. This time, instead of pure static, he heard something else. Faint, distorted, but definitely human voices. "Can anyone? Location? Rescue teams?" "Hello!" Caleb shouted into the radio. "This is Caleb Rowan. We're trapped in the service alcove near the emergency ventilation shaft. 3 of us. Fire Chief Morrison has a crush injury to his leg. Do you copy?" Static. Then, impossibly, a voice broke through. "Copy, barely reading you, heavy equipment, structural assessment, time." "How long?" Caleb pressed. "How long until you can reach us?" 12 hours, maybe more. Unstable." 12 hours. The words hit like a physical blow. They didn't have 12 hours of air, maybe 6 if they were lucky, probably less. Morrison had heard it too. His face was grim in the flashlight's glow. "Rowan, in my other pocket, there's something else." Caleb found what Morrison was talking about, a small folding knife and a piece of paper sealed in plastic. He pulled them out, confused. "What is this?" "My wife's phone number and a letter I wrote to my kids." Morrison's voice was steady, despite the pain he must be in. "If I don't make it out, I need you to make sure they get that letter." "You're going to make it out. We all are." "Don't bullshit me, Rowan. We both know the math. 12 hours to rescue, 6 hours of air at best." Morrison gestured at his trapped leg. "And I'm bleeding out slowly. Even if they get here in time, I might not be conscious to walk out." "Then I'll carry you out." "You can barely stand. Look at yourself. You're shaking from exhaustion. Your hands are destroyed. You've been underground for 7 hours straight without food or water. You're running on fumes and stubbornness." "Stubbornness got me this far. And it's going to get you killed if you're not careful." Morrison leaned his head back against the concrete. "But that letter, I need to know my kids will get it. I need to know they'll understand why I stayed, why I didn't come home." Caleb tucked the letter carefully into his own jacket. "They'll get it, but you're going to be the one to give it to them." Rebecca spoke up from where she'd been silently listening. "You both came back for strangers, for me and Sarah. You didn't have to." "Yeah, we did," Morrison said simply. "It's who we are." "My husband's going to want to meet you both," Rebecca continued. "Mark's going to want to thank you personally for saving his girls. He's probably going crazy up there right now, not knowing if we're alive or dead." "He knows Sarah's safe at least," Caleb said. "That's something. It's everything. But he's going to be a wreck thinking I'm—" Rebecca's voice caught. "I need to get out of here. I need to see my daughter again. I need to hold her and tell her everything's going to be okay." Caleb turned back to the rubble pile, attacking it with renewed determination despite his body's protests. If he could just create an opening, just a small gap to the outside, they might access better air. might buy themselves more time. An hour passed, maybe 2. Time became meaningless in the darkness, marked only by the gradual dimming of Caleb's flashlight as the battery died, by the increasing difficulty of drawing breath, by the way his hands moved slower and slower as exhaustion took its toll. Morrison had stopped talking, his breathing shallow and rapid. Shock was setting in hard now, his body shutting down from blood loss and trauma. Caleb checked on him periodically, making sure he was still conscious, still present. Rebecca had curled up in a corner, conserving her energy, her face streaked with tears she probably didn't even realize she was crying. And Caleb kept digging, stone by stone, piece by piece, moving debris that didn't seem to get any smaller no matter how much he removed. His mind started to wander, exhaustion and oxygen deprivation creating hallucinations at the edges of his vision. He saw Tommy standing in the darkness, giving him a thumbs up. Saw Amanda smiling the way she used to when they were young and immortal and thought nothing bad could ever happen. Saw Ellie's face, disappointed and heartbroken when they told her Daddy wasn't coming home. That image snapped him back to focus. He couldn't give up, wouldn't give up, not while Ellie was out there waiting for him. The radio crackled to life, startling all of them. "Rowan? Morrison? Can you hear us?" Caleb grabbed it. "Yes, we're here. What's your status?" "We've cleared the access shaft. We're bringing down drilling equipment to try to reach you from above. But Rowan," the voice paused, "the structural engineers are saying the whole section could collapse completely at any moment. We're working as fast as we can, but how long? 8 hours. Maybe 10. We're doing everything we can. 8 hours." They'd been underground for nearly 9 already. The air was so thin Caleb could barely think straight. Morrison was unconscious now, his breathing barely perceptible. Rebecca was fading in and out, her body starting to shut down from stress and lack of oxygen. Caleb clicked the radio back on. "Tell Ellie. Tell my daughter that I love her. Tell her I fought as hard as I could. Tell her—" His voice broke. "Tell her I'm sorry. Don't give up on us yet, Rowan. We're coming. Just hold on." But holding on was getting harder with every breath. Caleb's vision was tunneling, darkening at the edges. His hands had stopped hurting, which wasn't a good sign. Probably nerve damage from the constant abuse. His body was shutting down, piece by piece, preparing for the end it knew was coming. He thought about Tommy, about those final hours listening to his partner's knocking grow weaker and weaker, about the silence when it finally stopped, about the guilt that had lived in his chest ever since, the knowledge that he'd survived while Tommy died. Maybe this was fitting. Maybe this was justice. Caleb dying in a tunnel, just like Tommy had, bringing some kind of cosmic balance to the universe. Except Ellie didn't deserve that balance. Didn't deserve to lose both parents before she turned 8. Didn't deserve to grow up wondering if her father had thought about her at the end. Caleb forced himself to move. One more stone, one more piece of rubble, one more inch of progress toward impossible survival. His hand broke through. For a moment, he thought it was another hallucination, his dying brain offering him false hope. But then he felt it, air, moving air, coming from the small gap his hand had found. Not much, but enough to tell him there was open space on the other side of this rubble pile. "Rebecca," he croaked. "Help me. I found something." Rebecca stirred, crawled over, her movements sluggish but determined. Together they worked at the gap, widening it, creating an opening maybe 6 inches across. Fresh air flowed through, not a lot, but enough to clear the fog from Caleb's brain, enough to give him the strength to keep going. "Morrison," Caleb called. "Chief, can you hear me? We've got fresh air coming in. Stay with us." Morrison groaned, which was better than silence. Still alive, still fighting. They widened the gap to 8 inches, 10 inches, 12. Big enough now for Caleb to shine his dying flashlight through and see what was on the other side. Another cavity, larger than the one they occupied. And beyond that, he could see it, barely visible in the distance. A faint glow that might have been daylight, or might have been the last gift of his oxygen-starved imagination. "I'm going through," Caleb said. "You don't know what's on the other side," Rebecca protested weakly. "It could be unstable, could collapse." "Everything's unstable. Everything could collapse, but that's daylight. I'm sure of it." He wasn't sure at all, but hope was all they had left. Caleb squeezed through the gap, ignoring how the rough concrete tore at his already ruined shoulders. He emerged into the larger cavity and stood up fully for the first time in hours. His legs nearly gave out, muscles screaming from exhaustion, but he forced them to hold. The glow was real. It was coming from maybe 30 yards away, filtering down through cracks in the collapsed ceiling. Actual, genuine daylight. And between him and that light was a maze of debris that looked like it might collapse if he breathed on it wrong. Caleb didn't care. He moved toward the light, climbing over rubble, squeezing through gaps, following the glow like a dying man following salvation. Because that's exactly what he was, a dying man. And that light was salvation, and nothing else mattered. He reached the source and found himself staring up at a crack in the collapsed ceiling, maybe 2 feet wide. Through it, he could see sky. Actual blue sky. And more importantly, he could see movement, rescue workers, emergency vehicles, the bustling chaos of the rescue operation. "Hey!" Caleb screamed up through the crack. "Down here! We're down here!" Faces appeared at the opening, shocked, disbelieving faces of rescue workers who'd probably given up hope of finding anyone else alive. "Holy shit!" someone yelled. "We've got survivors! Get a rope down here now!" Chaos erupted above. Caleb turned and ran back through the maze of debris toward the pocket where Morrison and Rebecca waited. He squeezed back through the gap, his whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief and the impossible reality of survival. "We're getting out," he said, his voice breaking. "There's a crack in the ceiling. They're lowering ropes. We're actually getting out." Rebecca started crying, deep, racking sobs of relief. Morrison opened his eyes, a weak smile on his gray face. "Told you," Morrison whispered. "Told you your stubbornness would get us through." Getting Morrison through the narrow gap was a nightmare. His trapped leg had to be freed first, which meant using Caleb's pry bar to lift the beam just enough for Morrison to pull free. The fire chief bit through his lip to keep from screaming, blood running down his chin, his face going even grayer. But he was free, and Caleb and Rebecca dragged him through the gap, through the larger cavity, toward the crack where ropes were already descending. Rebecca went up first, secured in a rescue harness, crying the whole way. Then Morrison, unconscious now, his body limp as they hauled him toward daylight and medical care. Then Caleb. The rope felt like the most beautiful thing he'd ever touched. He clipped in, gave the signal, and felt himself rising toward that crack, toward the blue sky beyond, toward life and breath, and his daughter waiting for him. He emerged into chaos. Hands grabbed him, pulled him clear. Someone wrapped a blanket around him. Someone else shoved an oxygen mask over his face. Voices swirled around him, questions, congratulations, medical assessments. But Caleb only cared about one voice. "Daddy!" Ellie broke through the crowd of rescue workers, Marie chasing after her, and threw herself into Caleb's arms. He caught her, held her, buried his face in her hair, and let himself finally break down. He was crying. She was crying. They were both shaking and alive and together. "You came back," Ellie sobbed. "You promised, and you came back." "Always, baby," Caleb whispered. "Always." Sandra appeared with a stretcher, trying to convince Caleb to get medical attention, but he refused to let go of his daughter. They could check him over right here, right now, while Ellie held on to him like she'd never let go again. The paramedics worked around them, cleaning wounds, checking vitals, starting IVs. Someone told him he needed surgery on his hands, that he'd done permanent damage, that he was lucky to be alive. Caleb just held Ellie tighter and watched as the rescue operation continued around them. Morrison was rushed to a waiting helicopter, critical but stable. Rebecca was reunited with her husband and daughter, the whole family collapsing into each other's arms. Other survivors, the ones Caleb had rescued earlier, were scattered across the scene, being treated, being comforted, being alive. 14 people total had entered that tunnel's western section. 13 had made it out alive. Only Marcus, Vivian's driver, had died, crushed instantly in the initial collapse, gone before he even knew what was happening. 13 saved, 1 lost. The math should have felt like a victory, but Caleb kept thinking about Marcus's grandchildren, about Vivian's guilt, about how one death was still one too many. A commotion drew his attention toward the access road, where news vans and cameras had set up. And walking through them, being wheeled through them actually, in a hospital wheelchair with her leg in a cast and her face still bruised, was Vivian Lockhart. She shouldn't have been there, should have been in recovery from her surgery. But there she was, surrounded by reporters and lawyers and what looked like half the state government, her expression set with determination. She spotted Caleb across the chaos and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Caleb nodded once. Then Vivian turned to face the cameras, and even from this distance, Caleb could hear the beginning of her statement. "My name is Vivian Lockhart, and I'm responsible for this disaster." Vivian's voice carried across the rescue site, amplified by microphones and carried by cameras to millions of people watching live. Caleb sat on the ground with Ellie in his arms, Sandra still working on his injuries, and watched a billionaire destroy her own empire with nothing but the truth. "I ignored safety warnings," Vivian said, her voice steady despite the cameras, despite the lawyers frantically gesturing for her to stop, despite her father, an older man with silver hair and fury in his eyes, trying to push through the crowd toward her. "I buried geological surveys that showed the tunnel was being built on an active fault line. I approved substandard materials because they were cheaper and faster. I fired whistleblowers like Caleb Rowan, who tried to warn me that people would die because of my decisions." A reporter shouted a question that Caleb couldn't quite hear over the chaos of the rescue site. Vivian held up her hand for silence. "Marcus Chen was my driver for 15 years. He had 3 grandchildren. He died instantly in the initial collapse because I valued my career over his life. Tommy Chen died 18 months ago in a preliminary shaft collapse for the same reason. And 13 people nearly died tonight because I chose profit over safety." She paused, and even from this distance, Caleb could see tears on her face. "There is no excuse. There is no justification. There is only responsibility, and I accept it fully." Her father finally broke through, grabbed her wheelchair, tried to pull her away from the cameras. Vivian shook him off with surprising strength. "No," she said, not to the cameras, but to him. "I'm done protecting the family name. I'm done valuing Lockhart reputation over human decency. You taught me that business was everything, that success justified any compromise. You were wrong, and I was wrong to listen." The older man's face went purple with rage. "You're destroying everything I built. You built an empire on cut corners and buried bodies. I'm just making sure the world knows it." Vivian turned back to the cameras. "I'm releasing all internal documents related to the Ridgecrest Tunnel project. Every safety report, every geological survey, every decision I made that led to this disaster. And I'm calling for a full criminal investigation into Lockhart Industries, including myself. If people need to go to prison for this, and they should, I'll be first in line." Sandra finished wrapping Caleb's hands and stood back, shaking her head in wonder. "That woman just committed career suicide on live television." "No," Caleb said quietly, watching Vivian face down her father and the lawyers and the weight of her own guilt. "She just saved her soul." Ellie looked up at her father, confusion in her young eyes. "Why is she saying sorry on TV?" "Because she made mistakes that hurt people, and now she's trying to make it right." "Is that why you saved her? Because you knew she'd try to make it right?" Caleb considered the question. Had he known? When he'd crawled back into that tunnel to pull Vivian from the wreckage, had some part of him believed she was capable of redemption? "No," he admitted. "I saved her because it was the right thing to do, regardless of whether she deserved it. But I'm glad she's choosing to do the right thing now." Marie appeared with fresh clothes and a fierce hug that made Caleb wince as it pressed against his injuries. "You're an idiot," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "A brave, heroic, completely insane idiot. It's the family curse. Tommy would be proud. He'd also call you an idiot." Marie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "But he'd be proud." The mention of Tommy's name made Caleb's chest tighten. Would Tommy be proud? Or would he shake his head at Caleb's recklessness, at the way he'd risked leaving Ellie orphaned just to save strangers? As if summoning a ghost, a woman pushed through the crowd toward them, Chinese, maybe 60, her face weathered by grief Caleb recognized intimately. Tommy's mother. Mrs. Chen had been at every hearing after Tommy's death, had sat through every investigation, had watched Lockhart Industries bury the truth beneath legal paperwork and settlements. She stopped in front of Caleb, and for a long moment they just looked at each other, 2 people bound by loss and guilt and the complicated mathematics of survival. My son loved you like a brother, Mrs. Chen said finally. He would have done the same thing, gone back into that tunnel, saved those people. I'm sorry I couldn't save him, Caleb whispered. I heard him knocking for 6 hours and I couldn't reach him. I'm so sorry. I know, but you saved 13 people tonight. You answered their knocking. She reached out and squeezed his shoulder with surprising strength. Tommy's death meant something because it taught you not to walk away from people who need help. You honored him by saving them. Caleb couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. Mrs. Chen knelt down to Ellie's level. Your father is a good man, a brave man. Tommy chose well when he chose him as a partner. Ellie nodded solemnly. My daddy saves people. That's what he does. Yes, Mrs. Chen agreed. That's exactly what he does. She stood and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd, and Caleb felt something shift inside him. A weight he'd been carrying for 18 months. The guilt, the what-ifs, the crushing responsibility of being the one who survived, didn't disappear, but it lightened. Just a little. Just enough. The next 3 hours were a blur of medical assessments, police statements, and reporters shouting questions that Caleb ignored. He was loaded into an ambulance over his protests, Ellie and Marie climbing in with him, and taken to Boulder Medical Center. The same hospital where Vivian had been treated. The same hospital where, Caleb learned when they arrived, Fire Chief Morrison was in surgery for his leg, and David Chen's wife was in the ICU but stable. Where Jessica Morales and her children were being held for observation, Michael's head injury serious but not life-threatening. Where all 13 survivors were scattered across various floors, alive because a single dad with trust issues and a death wish had refused to walk away. Caleb's hands required surgery, tendon damage, nerve damage, enough torn tissue that the surgeon shook her head and told him it was a miracle he could still move his fingers at all. The surgery took 4 hours. When he woke up, both hands were wrapped in heavy bandages and Ellie was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her stuffed bear tucked under one arm. Marie was there too, reading a magazine but clearly not processing any of it. She looked up when Caleb stirred. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a mountain. That's because you did. Multiple times. Marie set down the magazine. The surgeon says you'll have permanent nerve damage, limited mobility in your left hand, chronic pain. You'll never work underground again. Caleb looked at his bandaged hands, processing this. His career, everything he'd trained for, everything he knew how to do, gone because he'd chosen to save people instead of himself. Worth it, he said. Of course it was worth it. But Caleb, what are you going to do? How are you going to support Ellie? He didn't have an answer. Hadn't let himself think that far ahead. All he'd thought about was getting people out alive, getting himself back to his daughter, surviving one more minute and then one more after that. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sandra poked her head in, still in her paramedic uniform, looking exhausted but pleased. You've got visitors. I told them you needed rest, but they insisted. She pushed the door open wider. Rebecca and Sarah Shaw entered, followed by Jessica Morales with Emma and a groggy but conscious Michael. David Chen came next, supported by his wife who had bandages wrapped around her head but was smiling. The motorcycle rider with the broken ribs, the young couple from the Mini Cooper, the elderly man Caleb had carried. One by one, all 13 survivors who could walk filed into Caleb's room, crowding around his bed. Rebecca spoke first, Sarah clutching her hand. We wanted to say thank you. All of us, you saved our lives. I was just doing what needed to be done, Caleb said, uncomfortable with the attention. You did more than that, David Chen said. I would have died in that car. My wife would have died. You didn't give up when any reasonable person would have. My son is alive because of you, Jessica added, her hand on Michael's shoulder. The boy looked pale and sleepy, but gave Caleb a small wave. The elderly man, Caleb learned his name was Walter, cleared his throat. I'm 83 years old. I've lived a long life. But my granddaughter is getting married next month, and now I'll be there to walk her down the aisle because you carried me out of that tunnel. One by one, they shared their stories, the lives they'd almost lost, the futures that still waited for them, the people who were grateful Caleb had been too stubborn to know when to quit. Sarah, the 4-year-old who'd climbed the ventilation shaft, wiggled free from her mother and walked up to Caleb's bedside. She held up a drawing she'd made, crude but heartfelt, showing a stick figure man with a flashlight pulling stick figures from a dark tunnel. "This is you," Sarah said, pointing to the stick figure with the flashlight. "You're a superhero." "I'm just a guy with a flashlight, sweetheart." "No," Sarah insisted with the absolute certainty only a 4-year-old could muster. "You're a superhero. My daddy says so." Caleb took the drawing carefully with his bandaged hands, his vision blurring with tears he refused to let fall. "Thank you, Sarah. This is the best gift I've ever gotten." After the survivors left, each one hugging him or shaking his bandaged hand or just saying thank you one more time, Caleb sat in his hospital bed staring at Sarah's drawing. Ellie had woken up during the visits and now sat beside him, her head on his shoulder. "They all love you," Ellie said softly. "They're just grateful. It'll fade." "Will it? When I think about the people who saved Mommy when she collapsed, I think about them every day. I'm grateful every day, even though it didn't work." Ellie paused. "For them, it worked. You think they'll forget that?" Caleb kissed the top of her head, having no answer. The next visitor arrived an hour later, after visiting hours had technically ended, but apparently nobody was enforcing rules for the man who'd saved 13 lives. Vivian Lockhart wheeled herself in, alone, without the lawyers and handlers who'd surrounded her earlier. She looked terrible, pale, exhausted, her casted leg elevated on the wheelchair's rest, her eyes red from crying or stress or both. But there was something different about her expression, something lighter, like confessing her sins had lifted a weight she'd been carrying for years. "Mr. Rowan," she said formally, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Ms. Lockhart," Caleb gestured at the empty chair. "You look like hell." "I feel like hell, but I'm told that's appropriate given my circumstances." Vivian positioned her wheelchair beside his bed. "I saw the survivors leaving, all 13 of them. 14 entered. Marcus didn't make it." "I know." Vivian's voice cracked slightly. "His family is suing Lockhart Industries. Good. They should. They should take everything." "Will they? Take everything?" "Probably. The documents I released show gross negligence, criminal misconduct, systematic fraud. The company will be dismantled. My father will likely go to prison. I'll definitely go to prison." She smiled, and it was almost genuine. "I'm told the federal prosecutors are very interested in talking to me." "You could have run, left the country. Your family has resources." "Yes. And 6 months ago I would have. Would have let lawyers handle everything. Would have hidden behind corporate protections and family money." Vivian looked at her bandaged leg. "But I spent 90 minutes under that tunnel with a steel beam through my leg, thinking I was going to die. And all I could think about was my daughter. How I barely knew her. How I'd chosen everything else, money, power, success, over being her mother, over being a decent human being." "You're getting a second chance," Caleb said. "Not everyone does. Thanks to you. You gave me that second chance when you came back for me." Vivian met his eyes. "You could have left me there. Should have left me there. I killed your partner." "Yeah, you did." "And you saved me anyway." "Yeah, I did." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Vivian reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "This is a check. $10 million. It's from my personal accounts, not company money. I want you to have it." Caleb stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "I don't want your money." "I know. That's why I'm giving it to you instead of to someone who'd take it gladly." Vivian set the envelope on his bedside table. "Your hands are ruined. You can't work underground anymore. You have medical bills, a daughter with a heart condition that requires ongoing care. This money isn't payment for saving me. It's not guilt money. It's practical money because you destroyed your hands saving people I should have protected in the first place. I don't need charity from you. It's not charity, it's responsibility. I'm responsible for those injuries. The least I can do is make sure you can take care of your daughter without working yourself to death at some job that doesn't use your skills." Caleb wanted to refuse. Wanted to throw the money back in her face, tell her she couldn't buy forgiveness or redemption or whatever she was looking for. But he looked at Ellie sleeping in the chair, thought about her medical bills, thought about the reality of trying to find work with ruined hands and no career prospects. Pride was expensive. Ellie's future was more important than his ego. "I'll take it," he said quietly. "For Ellie, Not for me. That's all I ask. Vivian wheeled herself toward the door, then paused. Mr. Rowan? When my daughter visits me in prison, and she will, I've already made arrangements, I'm going to tell her about you. About how a man I'd wronged saved me anyway. About how choosing to do the right thing, even when it costs you everything, is the only choice worth making. Tell her about Marcus instead, and Tommy. Tell her that choices have consequences, and the people who pay them aren't always the ones who made the choice. I'll tell her that too. Vivian opened the door. Thank you, Mr. Rowan. For my life. For my second chance. For reminding me that redemption is possible, even for people like me. Then she was gone, and Caleb was left staring at an envelope containing more money than he'd earned in 20 years of underground work. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of surgeries, physical therapy, and media attention Caleb desperately wanted to avoid. News outlets called him a hero. Politicians wanted to give him awards. Strangers stopped him on the street to thank him for restoring their faith in humanity. Caleb hated all of it. He wasn't a hero. He was just someone who'd heard knocking and answered, the way Tommy had taught him, the way anyone should. But the world didn't see it that way. The world wanted heroes, wanted someone to celebrate in the midst of tragedy, and whether Caleb liked it or not, he'd become that someone. The investigation into Lockhart Industries moved with surprising speed. Vivian's document release had provided prosecutors with everything they needed. Indictments came down within a month. Vivian pleaded guilty to all charges, refusing to fight or deflect blame. Her father fought everything, hired the best lawyers money could buy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The contractor, Meridian Construction, was dissolved, its leadership jailed. Safety regulations were rewritten. Laws were passed. Marcus's family received a settlement. Tommy's family received a settlement. The 13 survivors received settlements, and Caleb received more offers than he knew what to do with. Job offers, speaking engagements, movie deals. Everyone wanted a piece of the man who'd saved 13 lives. He turned down almost everything, accepted a position as a safety consultant, ironically for the same state agency that should have caught Lockhart Industries violations in the first place. The work was mostly desk-based, analyzing reports and conducting inspections. His ruined hands could handle it. It paid well enough to support Ellie without touching Vivian's money, which he'd put in a trust fund for his daughter's future. Fire Chief Morrison lost his leg below the knee, but kept his job, working from a desk and training new recruits with the kind of wisdom only near-death experiences could provide. He and Caleb met for coffee once a month, two men who'd faced death together and somehow lived to talk about it. The survivors stayed in touch, created a group chat, met quarterly for dinners where they told their stories, remembered their trauma, celebrated their survival. Caleb went to a few of these gatherings before realizing they needed each other more than they needed him. His presence turned the dinners into thank you sessions instead of healing sessions. But he stayed close with Sarah Shaw and her family. The little girl who'd climbed through the ventilation shaft sent him drawings regularly, always pictures of superheroes, always with a man who looked suspiciously like Caleb holding a flashlight. 6 months after the collapse, Caleb stood with Ellie at a memorial near the sealed tunnel entrance. The mountain had been deemed too unstable to reopen the tunnel, so it had been permanently sealed and designated as a memorial site. A simple stone monument had been erected, bearing Marcus's name and a plaque honoring all who'd been affected by the disaster. Flowers surrounded it, fresh ones, replaced weekly by people who still remembered. Vivienne was there too, serving the first months of her prison sentence, but granted special release to attend the dedication. She stood, not sat, her prosthetic leg hidden beneath tailored pants, beside a young girl who must have been her daughter Lydia. The resemblance was striking. The ceremony was brief. Morrison spoke. A local pastor said prayers. The governor, who'd attended the tunnel's grand opening 6 months earlier, gave a speech about safety and accountability that rang hollow but well-intentioned. Then Vivian stepped forward. She wasn't scheduled to speak, but nobody stopped her. "My name is Vivian Lockhart," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "I'm responsible for Marcus Chen's death. I'm responsible for the collapse that nearly killed 13 others. I'm responsible for destroying lives and families because I valued money over human decency. The crowd was silent, uncomfortable. But Vivian continued, I can't undo what I did. I can't bring Marcus back. I can't erase the trauma the survivors experienced. All I can do is accept responsibility, face the consequences, and try to spend the rest of my life making better choices. She turned to look at Caleb. And I can tell my daughter about the man who saved me when I didn't deserve saving, about how Caleb Rowan proved that doing the right thing matters more than whether someone deserves it. Lydia, 8 years old, serious-faced, walked up to the microphone beside her mother. My mommy did bad things, Lydia said, her voice small but clear. She knows it. She's sorry. And she's trying to be better. Mr. Caleb, thank you for giving my mommy the chance to be better. Caleb felt Ellie's hand slip into his, carefully, mindful of his healing injuries. His daughter looked up at him with those eyes so much like her mother's. That's why you saved her, Ellie whispered, so she could be a better mommy to Lydia. Was it? Caleb didn't know. In that moment, pulling Vivian from the wreckage, he hadn't been thinking about her potential for redemption or her daughter or any noble purpose. He'd just been thinking about Tommy's voice in his memory, about promises made to his dead partner, about not walking away when someone needed help. But if Vivian's second chance meant Lydia got a mother who was present, who was trying, who was better, then maybe that was reason enough. The ceremony ended. People dispersed. Vivian's guards escorted her back to the prison transport, but not before she and Lydia stopped by where Caleb stood with Ellie. The two girls looked at each other, 7 and 8 years old, both shaped by their mother's absences, both learning to navigate life with single parents who were trying their best. Do you want to see my drawings? Ellie asked suddenly. I draw stories about brave people. I like stories, Lydia said shyly. The girls moved a few feet away, Ellie pulling out her ever-present sketchbook. Vivian and Caleb watched them, two parents bound by circumstances neither had chosen, but both were learning to accept. She's beautiful, Caleb said. Your daughter. So is yours. You've done well with her. I've tried. That's all any of us can do. Vivian was quiet for a moment, then, I meet with prosecutors next week. They want details about other projects, other corners cut. It's going to destroy what's left of Lockhart Industries completely. And you're going to tell them everything. Every detail. Every decision. Every person who was involved. She paused. My father isn't speaking to me. Most of my family has disowned me. But Lydia writes me letters every week, tells me about school and friends and her life. For the first time since she was born, I actually know my daughter. Prison's an expensive way to find yourself. I deserve expensive. Vivian watched Lydia laugh at something Ellie had drawn. But she doesn't. She deserves a mother who's present, even if that mother can only visit from behind prison glass for the next few years. The guards called for Vivian. Time was up. She hugged her daughter goodbye, a long hug, genuine, full of love that Caleb suspected was new for both of them. As the prison transport pulled away, Lydia stood beside Ellie, both girls waving. Then Lydia turned to Caleb. My mommy says you're a hero. I'm not. I'm just someone who helps people. That's what heroes do, Lydia said with absolute certainty. They help people who need it. Out of the mouths of babes. Caleb looked at Ellie, who was grinning at him with that expression that meant she agreed with every word. Come on, he said, holding out his hands. Each girl took one, carefully, gently, aware of his injuries. Let's go home. They walked toward the parking lot, leaving the memorial behind. Morrison waved from his truck, his prosthetic leg visible as he climbed into the driver's seat. Mrs. Chen stood by her car, giving Caleb a small nod of acknowledgement. The 13 survivors, those who'd come to the ceremony, watched him go with expressions of gratitude and respect. And Caleb felt, for the first time in 18 months, like maybe Tommy would be proud. Like maybe surviving when his partner died wasn't something to feel guilty about, but something to honor by living well, by saving others, by teaching his daughter that doing the right thing mattered more than doing the easy thing. Ellie squeezed his hand. Daddy, can we go to the mountains, the safe ones, and look at stars like you promised? Absolutely. Tonight. We'll pack up the telescope and drive up to Morrison Lake. Just you and me and the stars. And maybe we can talk about Mommy? Tell stories about her? As many stories as you want, sweetheart. They reached the car, Caleb's old Explorer, still sporting the cracked windshield and the dent in the roof from where debris had hit it during the initial collapse. He should probably get a new car with Vivian's money, but this one had carried them through hell. It deserved to keep carrying them forward. As they drove away from the memorial, the mountain looming behind them, Ellie pulled out her sketchbook and started drawing. Caleb glanced over at her work and saw what she was creating. Not superheroes or rescue scenes, but a simple image of a family. A mother, a father, and a daughter holding hands beneath a starry sky. "That's us," Ellie said. "Before. When we were all together." "That's beautiful, baby." "And this..." She turned the page, showing him her next drawing. "This is us now, you and me. Still together, still family." The drawing showed a father and daughter holding hands, standing at the base of a mountain with light breaking over its peak. Behind them, two figures stood in shadow, a woman and a man, watching over them. Amanda and Tommy, Caleb realized. The people they'd lost, still present in memory, still part of their story. "We're still family," Ellie said firmly, "even though some people are missing. We're still us." Caleb had to pull over because his vision had blurred too much to drive safely. He parked on the shoulder and pulled Ellie into a hug. This fierce, brilliant, brave girl who'd somehow learned to navigate loss better than he had. "I love you," he said. "More than mountains, more than tunnels, more than breathing. You're my whole world, Ellie." "I know, Daddy. That's why you always come back." They sat there for a while, father and daughter, survivors of different tragedies, holding on to each other as traffic passed and the sun moved across the sky and life continued its steady march forward. Eventually, they pulled back onto the road and drove toward home, toward dinner and homework and the comfortable routines of evening. Toward a future neither of them had been sure they'd reach. Toward the mountains, the safe ones, where they'd watch stars appear one by one and tell stories about the people they'd lost and the people they'd saved and the complicated, beautiful mess of living. Behind them, the sealed tunnel stood silent in the mountain's shadow. A tomb for one man, a miracle for 13 others, a turning point for everyone involved. The mountain had taken its toll and given back survivors, had destroyed and preserved, had killed and created heroes in equal measure. And somewhere in a minimum security prison, Vivian Lockhart was writing letters to her daughter and meeting with prosecutors and learning what it meant to build something better than an empire, learning to build character, integrity, redemption. Somewhere in that same prison, her father was fighting charges and blaming everyone but himself and refusing to accept that consequences finally applied to him too. The mountain didn't care about either of them. The mountain just was, eternal, patient, waiting for the next group of humans to test themselves against its weight. But Caleb cared. Cared about the people he'd saved and the people he'd lost. Cared about teaching Ellie that heroism wasn't about being fearless, but about being afraid and helping anyway. Cared about honoring Tommy's memory by becoming the kind of man Tommy had believed he could be. That night, at Morrison Lake, father and daughter lay on a blanket beneath stars that had witnessed everything and judged nothing. Caleb pointed out constellations while Ellie named them after people they loved. Amanda's star, Tommy's cross, the Marcus moon. "What about Vivian?" Ellie asked. "Does she get a star?" Caleb thought about it, looking up at the infinite sky. "Yeah," he said finally, "she gets one. That one..." He pointed at a star just rising over the mountain's peak, coming up from darkness, finding its place in the sky. "That's a good star for her," Ellie agreed. Then, "Daddy, if you had to do it again, go into the tunnel, save all those people, would you?" "Yes. Even though it hurt you, even though you can't work underground anymore, even though you almost didn't come back to me?" Caleb pulled his daughter closer, this child who asked impossible questions and deserved honest answers, especially because of all that. Because you need to grow up knowing that we help people, even when it costs us. That we don't calculate the price before we do what's right. That being your father means teaching you what matters, and what matters is that we save people. Even when it's hard, even when it's scary, especially when it's both. Ellie was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "When I grow up, I want to be like you." "No," Caleb said gently. "When you grow up, be better than me. Be smarter, safer, wiser. Save people without destroying yourself in the process. Be the hero who makes it home every time. But you made it home. This time, I got lucky. It wasn't luck, Daddy. You're just too stubborn to die. Caleb laughed, really laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd managed since the collapse. Yeah, I guess I am. They watched stars appear until Ellie fell asleep, her head on Caleb's shoulder, her breathing deep and even and alive. Caleb stayed awake longer, thinking about the mountain and the tunnel and the 13 lives that continued because he'd been too stubborn to walk away. Thinking about Tommy, about how his partner had taught him that saving people mattered more than anything else, and how that lesson had cost Tommy everything but given Caleb purpose. Thinking about Vivienne, about how redemption was possible even for people who'd done terrible things, as long as they were willing to face the truth and accept the cost. Thinking about all the small moments that had led to this one. Amanda's death teaching him that life was fragile, Tommy's death teaching him that walking away was sometimes worse than dying, Ellie's birth teaching him that some things were worth any sacrifice. The mountain rose behind them, dark against darker sky, stars scattered across its peak like promises. Somewhere beneath it, the tunnel still existed, crushed and buried, holding its dead and its secrets. But up here, in the clean mountain air, with his daughter sleeping safe beside him, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of forgetting or the peace of being finished. The peace of knowing he'd done what needed doing, saved who needed saving, honored the promises he'd made to the people he loved. The peace of having fought until dawn and lived to see another day. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Caleb whispered words into the darkness, sending them out to wherever Tommy might be listening. I heard the knocking, brother. I answered. I didn't walk away. Just like you taught me. And somewhere in the universe, Caleb liked to think Tommy heard him and smiled, proud of the man his partner had become, glad that his death had taught lessons worth learning, satisfied that his memory lived on in the people Caleb saved and the daughter he was raising to understand that helping others was never the wrong choice. The mountain stood silent witness to it all, patient and eternal, waiting for tomorrow's dramas to unfold. But tonight, beneath its watchful presence, a father and daughter slept peacefully under the stars, survivors both. Their futures uncertain, but their present secure. And in the morning, when Ellie woke and asked her father if they could visit the memorial again, bring flowers for Marcus and Tommy, Caleb would say yes to remembering the dead, yes to honoring the survivors, yes to teaching his daughter that life was about showing up for people even when, especially when, it was hard. Because that was what heroes did. Not because they were fearless, but because they were afraid and helped anyway. Not because saving people was easy, but because walking away was impossible. Not because they always survived, but because some things were worth the risk. And in the end, that single truth that helping people mattered more than the cost was worth more than all the empires Vivienne Lockhart had ever built, more than all the money her father had ever earned, more than anything except the small hand that would slip into Caleb's when they got home and the voice that would say, I love you, Daddy, one more time. Everything else was just details. Everything else was just survival. But this was living.